Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Overwatch comes to Marvel. Chapter 61. Tony smiled and nodded, then stared at the deep pit glowing with lightning with Winston, and immediately frowned. What's going on? This guy is wearing a conductive armor, and the current gathered on the whip to attack. I beat him to death, but suddenly the current overflowed, and he became what he is now. Luo Ning said, his current voice is naturally warm. Stone's voice sounded very rough. Conductive armor. Tony wondered, how big of a battery is he carrying to power him? Tony's question also made the onlookers think, that's right, electricity can't be generated out of thin air, there must be something supplying power, but this guy fought with an electric whip for half an hour, and he didn't see any signs of damage on his body. Power items such as large batteries. How strange. You might not believe it, but he also has an arc reactor, Ronan said. Tony was stunned for half a second, and immediately said firmly, impossible. In this world, apart from him, no one has mastered the arc reactor technology. The arc reactor is something that he regards as more important than life. It is 1,000 times more important than the battle suit. Even if he gives the suit to others, so what? Without the arc reactor, it is a pile of scrap metal. As for the energy supply produced by scientists, the device, less than 1% of the arc reactor, is nothing to worry about. Once his reactor technology falls into the hands of others, the world will be in chaos. Therefore, regarding the arc reactor, he is determined not to reveal a word to others, even the closest people. I said you wouldn't believe it, Ronan said. Hey, the lightning has dissipated. Someone yelled, and Ronan and Tony's attention returned to the pit. Tony's eyes were full of panic, and he wanted to jump down to confirm what the energy supply device on this guy was. As long as it's not an arc reactor, it's nothing to worry about. Okay, Luo Ning stared at it, and saw that the electric light had not completely dissipated, and there were still many surrounding the black body. Compared with the body, the silver armor was particularly eye-catching. Quite surprised, after being punched so many times by him, the armor is not broken, and it seems that there is still electricity flowing inside. The electric whip, which was silent by the whip rope, suddenly brightened, and the electric arc entangled again. Go! Luo Ning yelled, and some of the crowd turned around and ran away in fright when they saw the whip rewound with electric current. Those who didn't notice heard Winston's urgent shouts. Although they didn't know what happened, they could hear the urgency of the situation from Winston's voice, so their hearts beat faster and they ran away in a panic. My mission has not been completed, Iron Man, you are finally here. Whiplash's eyes suddenly opened, flashing with silvery white light, and the whole body was surrounded by electric current, just like the god of thunder descending. Gorilla, thank you for providing me with such a strange electrical energy. Next, neither you nor Iron Man can escape. The whip rope hit the electric whip, wrapped around the fire hydrant on the road, and pulled himself up. Drop your weapon and don't move. The policeman took out a pistol and pointed at the whip, seemingly as stable as an old dog, but in fact panicked a lot. I have never seen a guy whose head was deformed by the beating can stand up, and such a strong current lingers around him, and the crackling sound of the current makes their scalp numb. Seeing the glowing reactor on Whiplash's chest, Tony was taken aback. How could that be? How can others master reactor technology? Who the hell is this guy? A series of questions messed up his head. Luo Ning also didn't expect that the dying whip could still stand up, and the current flowing all over his body surrounded him like an electric man, full of majestic thunder and lightning power. He couldn't figure out why an ordinary person could still stand up after being beaten beyond recognition. The Hulk might kill someone if he knew it. Although the battle armor protected his bones, his head was deformed by the beating. Not only is he not stupid, but he still clearly remembers the purpose of this trip. Did you hear that? The policeman yelled. Whiplash flicked his hair, revealing his bloody face. His mouth moved, as if he was sneering. As soon as the whip passed, one policeman was electrocuted to the ground, and the rest of the policemen's expressions changed in shock, and they shot wildly, but before the bullets touched the body of the whip, they were annihilated by the violent electric current surrounding them. The current intensity of the whip rope is undoubtedly stronger. What? Run! This guy must be a monster. Seeing the police being electrocuted to death in an instant, the crowd screamed in shock and dared not stay here any longer, and ran away without looking back. Take out the camera and shoot the scene. Luo Ning could only watch the policemen being electrocuted to death one by one, not daring to step forward rashly. Winston's rage state has been lifted, and the fate of rushing over is not much better than that of the police. However, he only has one pair of glasses. If he has extra glasses, he can try to throw them at the feet of the whip, but he doesn't know how to use them. Will Suo step on it? Tony. Winston's roar woke Tony up. Seeing the last policeman fall to the ground, Tony raised his palm furiously. After accumulating energy, a palm cannon was fired. Bang! The whip rope calmly swung the electric whip and scattered the palm cannon. Fired another palm cannon, the same thing. Iron Man, is this all you can do? The whip rope swung out the electric whip suddenly, but Tony couldn't dodge it. The electric whip left a scorched black mark on Mark 5, and the suit was seriously damaged. Tony's eyes widened. Although Mark 5's defense was not as good as Mark 4's, it wasn't something that could be defeated by any bad weapon. It's impossible to beat Mark 5 like this with a whip. The police who came later all shot with small pistols, but found it useless and had to ask for assistance. Tony is very smart and knows how to keep a distance. The enemy's whip is limited by its length, but his recoil particle beam can attack from a long distance. But at a long distance, the power of the palm cannon decreases with the distance, and it cannot cause damage to the whip rope. Tony Stark, you are doomed to be defeated by me. You, the son, will pay the debt owed by your father. The whip rope rushed out suddenly, and a whip strangled Tony's neck, and the lightning flashed, splashing sparks. Tony struggled, and the wear and tear on his suit was extremely serious. If he was hit by such a strong current again, Mark 5 would be scrapped within a minute. Thomas waited and watched for a long time, and could only be anxious. He thought it was over, but he didn't expect this guy to have such tenacious vitality. He was simply an invincible Xiaoqiang. He really wanted to help, but he, a fake and shoddy soldier 76, couldn't help him. He would end up like those policemen, so he could only hope that Iron Man or Winston could use other methods. Tony gradually struggled weakly, and at this moment, with a swoosh, an arrow pierced the sky and shot through the wind. Could it be Hawkeye? Luo Ning looked in the direction pointed by the end of the arrow. On the top of the building, a man in a sleeveless jacket was carrying a quiver on his back. His eyes were as sharp as eagles staring at where he was. To be precise, he was staring at the whip, or it was the arrow. This person is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Clinton Francis Patton, whose nickname is even louder, Hawkeye. Known as the sharpshooter in the Marvel world, he has a pair of eyes that can see through everything. No tricks can hide his eyes. His archery skills are also well-deserved number 1. Arrows with different functions make him even more powerful. It is precisely because of this that he can become a member of the Avengers. Although his personal strength is not outstanding in the Avengers, he can even be said to be the bottom one, but his observation ability is unmatched, and his team contribution is still relatively large. Seeing him, he reminded him of Shimada Hanzo, who was equally skilled in archery in Overwatch. He was used to playing Overwatch, so Luo Ning felt that it would be better to call him Hanzo, or the preschool half. The two are also well known for their archery skills, and they are also marksmen in their respective worlds. They also carry various arrows and have a duel. Withdrawing his thoughts, the arrow was submerged by the vast electric current before it touched the body of the whip, and the steel arrow was as fragile as paper. It didn't attract the whip rope's attention. The whip rope desperately pulled on the electric whip, and tightly strangled Tony's neck. Mark 5's neck was already scorched black, but Tony had no choice but to struggle hard. On the top floor, Hawkeye, who originally raised the corner of his mouth, immediately became serious. After only a moment, he raised the corners of his mouth again, and said disdainfully, "Interesting, come and taste this arrow. Draw an arrow from the quiver and put it on the bow. Call out." In the blink of an eye, the arrow came 100 meters away, and Luo Ning could clearly hear the sound of the wind breaking, but regardless of the whip, killing Tony was his lifelong wish. Bang! The arrow exploded, causing the whip to shake slightly, but it seemed useless. Hawkeye frowned. None of these works. It seems that I have to try this. Another arrow was taken out. The shape of this arrow is very simple, but the arrow is shining with crystal luster. It's your job to let me use it. Hawkeye drew the big bow, shot the arrow confidently, and came behind the whip in the blink of an eye. ZZZ. This arrow was actually inserted into the body of the whip, and the current in that piece was even dissipated, making an unwilling sound. The whip rope finally felt the pain. He touched his back and pulled out the arrow. Seeing that it was an arrow, his expression was extremely surprised. Even bullets couldn't break through his strong electric defense. How could a small arrow do it? The crowd also stared incredulously at the man who still used such an ancient weapon in modern society. At first they thought it was a middle-aged man standing on the roof of the building, thinking that standing tall and seeing far could save the world. They insist on this view. The situation got better with the second arrow, and it wasn't until the third arrow was shot that they realized that this man was not a middle schooler, but a real hero. Others may not know why that arrow is stronger than a bullet, but Luo Ning has the answer in his heart, because the arrow of that arrow is either an adamantium alloy arrow or a vibration gold arrow, they are the hardest metals in the Marvel Universe. In terms of strength, it is much harder than the shell of a bullet. The hardest does not come out of thin air. The skeleton of Wolverine is Edmund alloy, indestructible and indestructible. Captain America's shield and Black Panther's suit are both made of vibranium, which can protect against anything, bullets, shells, missiles. There is nothing vibranium can't stop. To break through the whiplash defense, the arrow material must be one of the two. Such a powerful enemy also attracted Whiplash's attention. His gaze, like the crowd, fell on the high-rise building, and when he met the eagle-like sharp gaze, he felt a little dazzling, as if the man's eyes, hiding a sharp knife. As long as the eyes meet, the knife will show its sharpness and stab your eyes. Hawkeye smiled again. For him, there is no defense that cannot be broken, only the arrows are well prepared. Tony took the opportunity to tear the electric whip away, and then fled. Mark V's wear and tear did not allow him to continue fighting. The whip went back and chased him. He couldn't deal with opponents that far away, but he could kill Tony, and the gorilla returned to its normal state, posing no threat to him, and the gorilla in this state could not withstand his high-intensity electric current. Although rough skin and thick flesh will not be electrocuted to death, it will also cause paralysis and immobility. In addition to Hawkeye, other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents also came, including Coulson. Because the Black Widow is on a mission, she can't show her true face to the public for the time being. She can only watch the battle from a distance, but she is worried. The strength of the whip was beyond her imagination. Even if she went, she might not be able to subdue this guy who was discharged. But Barton could use the distance advantage to constantly interfere with him, providing opportunities for Winston and Iron Man. As for the other agents, they only dared to provide fire support from a distance, and did not dare to approach. The electric whip couldn't even hold the Iron Man covered in iron, let alone them. Another arrow flew in, and the reaction of the whip was not fast, and the one who shot him was Hawkeye, the #1 shooter in the Marvel world, so there was no possibility for him to dodge. So this arrow hit the whipcord's back. The whip rope stopped chasing Tony, pulled out the arrow and continued on. Is this guy a monster? Ordinary people will be seriously injured by an arrow even if they don't die, not to mention the adamantium alloy arrow, but this guy who is covered in electricity is fine. What should I do? What he didn't know was that the whip's body was already immobilized under Winston's fist, but was accidentally stimulated by an electric current, causing the damaged body to operate in another way. Luo Ning is not a scientist, so he can only think so far-fetchedly. He doesn't understand why the whip can still move freely after being punched dozens or hundreds of times by Winston. Immortal. The whip continued to chase, ignoring the bullets. There is no way for Ronin. Using the Tesla cannon will only charge the whip rope, and using the fist will be paralyzed by the electricity, so he can only rely on the eagle eye. I believe a miracle will happen. Putting the arrow on the bowstring, Hawkeye looked solemn. This is the last one. I hope to get a headshot. There is no doubt that this is the most embarrassing time for Iron Man. Mark V was so worn out that he had to take off his suit and escape. Hawkeye held his breath, his eyes fixed on the moving whip. At this moment, there was no expression on his face, and archery required full concentration, especially at such a critical moment. The head is the core of the human body, so he didn't believe that if the head was shot with an arrow, that guy could still run around. As soon as he let go, the arrow shot away quickly. At the same time, Tony saw that he was about to be caught up, turned around and raised his arm, and shot out a palm cannon. Although he took off his battle suit, He left his arm parts in order to be able to use the palm cannon and buy himself a little chance to escape. The whip stumped his feet, and with a whip, the palm cannon was instantly scattered, but the arrow shot across the top of the whip, and a little blood was wiped out. Hawkeye punched the air angrily. This arrow should have caused a headshot, as long as the whip didn't stop. What a teammate, like a pig. He gave Iron Man an annoyed look. There are only 3 adamantium alloy arrows. This thing is not steel. It is not easy to find some. He always only takes 3 arrows when he goes out to perform missions, because 3 arrows are enough for him to deal with any enemy. But now, when the 3 arrows are exhausted, then the guy seemed all right. The crowd also saw that the arrow should have ended everything, but the whip stopped halfway. Iron Man did it himself. They didn't complain. They just hoped that the man standing on the top of the building overlooking everything could continue to display his extraordinary archery skills. Hawkeye is confident that the next arrow will also hit his head, but without the arrow of the adamantium alloy arrow, ordinary arrows cannot break through the strong electric defense, and he is also in trouble for this. Give him another one, and he will definitely be able to solve this trouble guy. But no, seeing this, the Black Widow slammed the wall hard. She knew that there was no way for Hawkeye to make a breakthrough, so she considered whether to expose her identity and go out to hold the whip, which would also temporarily save Tony from life-threatening. She approached Tony in order to let Tony join S.H.I.E.L.D., to be precise, to join the director's new team to deal with the world crisis, the Avengers. If Tony died like this, the mission would undoubtedly fail, and there was no need for her to conceal her identity. So, she ran to the bathroom and changed into a black combat uniform, and rushed out without hesitation. Natasha, wait, I don't think you need to expose yourself so early. Winston seems to be planning something, he must have a way. The Black Widow appeared in Hawkeye's field of vision, and Hawkeye immediately dissuaded Natasha from revealing herself, and everything she had done before would be in vain. In his observation, Winston's angry eyes stared at Whiplash. Are you sure? Black Widow stopped, her eyes full of doubts. Sure, wait a little longer, Iron Man won't die in a while. Hawkeye said. Well, the failure of the operation is your fault. Hawkeye pouted helplessly. What's mine is mine. Luo Ning was actually thinking of a way. Hawkeye didn't seem to have that kind of powerful arrow anymore. Looking at it, it seemed that he was the only one who could stop the whip, but how to do it? The original rage is released, and now the rage value is 0. If you want to fill it up, you have to generate rage, and the fastest way to generate rage is to let the enemy crush his eyes, but he doesn't have any extra eyes for the whip to step on. What to do, what to do? He couldn't just watch Tony die in the hands of the whip because of emotion and reason. Miracle warm. In Luo Ning's mind, he suddenly recalled that day when he changed his clothes tirelessly at home, which is the so-called super transformation, but what's the use of changing clothes? Skin does not have any bonus to attributes. No matter what, I can only try it now. A dead horse is a living horse, doctor. Activate. Super transformation. Of course, it is impossible for him to shout out this second line, but to recite it silently in his heart. As he wished, Winston completed the change of clothes, not only the clothes, but even the hair. Luo Ning glanced down. The gray hair turned brownish yellow, and the spacesuit also changed into a battle armor with green and yellow as the main color. As for the face, earth-shaking changes have taken place. Of course, he can't see it himself. It's like painting a colorful mask on his face, which is quite dramatic. At first glance, Luo Ning didn't realize which skin of Winston it was. It was equipped with a dragon head aircraft on the back. The color based on Chinese red showed the domineering power of the dragon head. The Longan with blue light was the finishing touch. Of course he couldn't see the back, so he could only take out the Tesla cannon and take a look. The word, empty, on the cannon made him quickly understand. Goku. The skin is based on the Monkey King in the Chinese mythology, Journey to the West. The costumes are not bad, but they are too fat, the obese version of Monkey King. The change in Winston attracted everyone's attention. Winston has transformed. Wow, what is this? It's kind of like Sun Wu Kong. Sun Wu Kong, who is that? Whenever Americans read Monkey King, they seem extremely difficult, and it sounds uncomfortable, just like Chinese people speaking English, no matter how awkward it sounds. Hawkeye's eyes are no longer sharp at this moment, but full of doubts. The same is true for Black Widow. Winston's performance has exceeded their cognition. Winston does not have this unique shape in the movie. And then, Luo Ning struggled for a while, and rushed up like this. Are you sure you won't be electrocuted to the ground like before? There seemed to be no choice. Tony was running out of strength. So, he activated the jetpack, and the two faucets behind him sprayed flames, sending him in front of the whip. The crowd burst into deafening voices, thinking that Winston had evolved, become stronger, and had the courage to face the whip. But only Luo Ning knew that his current situation had not changed except that his appearance had become cooler. Monkey, do you still dare to come here? The whip rope was shaken by the air wave from Winston's landing. After stabilizing his figure, he stared at Winston with dead eyes. Winston did indeed look like a monkey now, and his hair had turned into a monkey's tan, and the gray hair that belonged to the gorilla was gone forever. Whiplash also found that he was not the same as before, but his heart was as calm as the surface of a lake. You think you can deal with me after changing your fur? As long as the monkey's attack method is still electric discharge, then there is nothing he can do about it, and more powerful electric energy will be provided for him. I am your grandpa Sun Wukong. Of course, you can also call me Monkey King, or Fighting Victory Buddha. Luo Ning was very angry when he said this. Sun Wukong is a superhero belonging to the East, so he should add some buff no matter what. Kabuta can become 100 times stronger when he activates the super transformation form. Winston's transformation is not to say 100 times stronger, but at least 10 times stronger, otherwise he can just slip away. Whiplash couldn't understand what he was saying, he only knew that the gorilla was in his way and he had to deal with it. Court death. The whiplash swung ferociously, but Luo Ning blocked it with his arm. Snapped. Fine. Being hit by the electric whip, Luo Ning felt nothing at all. Whiplash stared, apparently not expecting his defense to become stronger. Another whip. Similarly, Luo Ning raised his arm and easily blocked it. What is the principle? After changing the outfit, the skin becomes thicker. It's not scientific. Immediately, he suddenly thought, this skin is called Wukong, maybe it has some abilities of Monkey King. Sun Wukong has the indestructible body of King Kong. That's all I can think of, other explanations don't make sense. Thinking of this, Luo Ning fiercely punched his chest, and the whip took a small step back in fright. I warn you, if you stop me again, I will turn you into a piece of coke. Whiplash retreated in his heart. The current intensity was the highest ever, but it couldn't do any harm to the gorilla, so it would be difficult for the gorilla to confront him head-on, so he had to avoid it. I really want to see how you turn me into coke. Ronan grinned, put away the Tesla cannon, and rushed forward. Now he didn't have to worry about the current on the whip, he only needed to hammer the whip to death. Everyone was terrified when they saw the punches to the flesh. Winston had really evolved and was no longer afraid of electricity. Hawkeye on the roof also heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Winston lived up to everyone's expectations and subdued the whip, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. Iron Man's life and death determine many things. His eagle-like eyes also showed a little admiration. Such a character can indeed be called a superhero, and he can always rush to the scene at the first moment of danger. If Winston hadn't arrived, I'm afraid Iron Man won't last until now. The director is a bit worrying. The director is very worried that Soldier 76 and Winston will bring harm to the world, but in his opinion, regardless of Soldier 76, as far as Winston is concerned, he will only bring peace to the world. On the other hand, S.H.I.E.L.D. has always taken it as its mission to solve huge hazards. These agents only talk about maintaining world peace, but when the real danger comes, the Overwatch heroes are ahead of them. Maybe they should really review themselves. Mission complete. Natasha, you quickly switch back, don't let Tony Stark find out. Natasha in the field of vision was wearing a black uniform, staring blankly at Winston, who was beating the whip, and froze there motionless. It was only after hearing the voice that Black Widow came to her senses, and then answered absent-mindedly, I see. I didn't expect Winston to be so savage and terrifying, and he didn't see the docile and cute appearance when he was a child. Then she shook her head and walked back. The task was done, thanks to Winston, otherwise she would be in an embarrassing situation. Cheers of victory broke out in the audience, shouting, "Winston," and of course, the crowd mourned for the few policemen who died. They died in line of duty to protect the safety of the people. Winston didn't hold back, and the policemen didn't persuade him to stay alive, because they were worried that the scene just now would happen again, so it was better to kill him, and it was considered revenge for the brothers. Luo Ning found that his current strength was much stronger than before, perhaps because he had inherited Sun Wukong's natural supernatural power. It is impossible to stand up. With the last punch, Winston raised his head and bowed to the dead policeman. It was him who watched these policemen die, but he couldn't do anything at that time, and now he was whipped to death, can be regarded as a comfort to those heroic spirits. After activating the jetpack, Winston flew out and disappeared from everyone's sight. Tony was rescued, and he ran back to the hall in a panic, ran to the bathroom, poured cold water on his face, and then checked his blood toxin level, which undoubtedly increased by 2 percentage points. I should have died there. Tony punched the wall, angrily. It is better to die than to live and suffer. At this time, Pepper and Black Widow came over, and Tony quickly treated them with another face. He didn't want others to be sad with him, and he just had to bear the pain himself. Luo Ning didn't go back, booked a plane ticket and flew home by himself, and then notified Thomas to come back as soon as possible. This is done only to deceive the world. Dick quickly called, "Mr. Luo Ning, do you know the ability of the Prophet?" "What?" Of course Luo Ning pretended not to know anything. "You said before that you don't want me to race, but I was almost attacked just now. If it wasn't for Winston, I might already be dead." He also finally understood that it was not an illusion, but a real occurrence. It was only when Winston knocked out the electric whip when he swung it out that he was rescued. Luo Ning was stunned for a moment. So, the racing driver who was almost whipped was Dick. Thinking of this, he felt that the trip was not a loss, and his worry was necessary. "What are you talking about? I asked you not to race because I have something important to discuss with you. You said you were attacked. How is the situation now? The security system of the F1 Monaco Grand Prix is not that bad." Luo Ning acting very nice. Even he himself thinks he is a talent. "Forget it, let's meet and talk. Tomorrow morning, I have to go back now and have a good rest. Take it easy. What I encountered today is too thrilling. Thanks to Overwatch, thanks to Winston. I hope Reinhardt, who I played, you can also come out to help me when I am in danger. Of course I hope not to be in danger." The voiceover there was very fast. "Okay." Luo Ning leaned weakly on the sofa. He was the one who was so tired. Hurrying over, he turned into Winston and fought with the whip before his butt was hot. He thought that the whip was beaten half to death, but he stood up unscientifically from the pit, which was better than the whip in the movie. Even stronger. If it wasn't for the activation of the super transformation form, it would be hard to imagine what the result would be. Perhaps Iron Man would receive a lunchbox, which would directly affect the subsequent development of the plot. But the whip was killed by him, and Hammer was incapable of creating those robots. The terrorist attack at the expo would not happen, and the war machine would not be born, so it was not a big problem. As long as the key people don't die. Anyway, after solving the big trouble of whipping, the series of troubles behind will be gone, and there is no need to worry that the terrorist attack at the expo will hurt the people around him. Next, we just need to rest well, and then let the crew complete the filming of Reinhardt, and everything will be fine. In a cafe, in a quiet environment, under the soft light, the two big men sat facing each other, chatting happily, and actually showed an inexplicable smile while talking. After listening to this story, do you have a clearer understanding of Reinhardt? Luo Ning asked with a smile. Dick nodded. That's right, only the environment can create a person's character. Reinhardt hasn't experienced that incident yet, so he naturally has no entanglement in his heart, so he is straightforward in every word and action, and doesn't think too much about what he does. To put it bluntly, I feel a little stunned. Luo Ning raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, "That's right, that's what I want." As expected of an actor who won a certain award for Best Leading Role, I can't remember the name. Anyway, it is not comparable to those pheasant awards in China. Dick's comprehension ability is really good. Doesn't Mr. Ronan drink coffee? Dick picked up the coffee and took a sip, and when he put it down, he found that there was nothing in Ronan's place. Luo Ning shook his head. I don't drink coffee, don't worry about me. He knew that Dick liked to drink coffee, so he made an appointment to meet in the coffee shop, which was regarded as respect for Dick. After talking about this matter, Dick's eyes showed a trace of doubt, and then he asked tentatively, "Actually, in my heart, or the entire crew, or even the entire United States, there is a big question. I know what you want to ask, Soldier 76 and Winston, right?" Luo Ning knew that this question existed in the hearts of the people of the whole country, but he could not unravel this mystery prematurely, because he was waiting for an opportunity that would allow him to fight against all dangers. At that time, even if he made everything public, so what? At that time, no one could threaten him, and he could still live comfortably, but not now. He is still not strong enough. A whip can almost knock him out of his feet, let alone the boss in the future. Especially the battle in New York, the first battle of the reunion. That was a disaster in New York. He had to be responsible for himself and the people around him, and not let them get hurt. That's why he had to speed up the filming process. Activating Overwatch heroes is the only thing he can rely on right now. Soldier 76 I won't talk about because I don't know, but Winston, do you know? Dick described with exaggerated movements what he had seen about Winston. He saved me, saved Iron Man, saved everyone, and defeated that guy covered in electricity. Dick's eyes were full of admiration. Winston's behavior was indeed a hero. And he, at most, is an actor who plays a hero, and the two cannot be compared. Actually, I don't care how they came here. Even if you say they popped out of a movie, I believe it. I just need to know that they will protect human beings. So what I want to ask is, will Reinhardt be like? Do they appear the same? Dick's eyes glowed. After a short silence, Dick continued, "You know, I can only ask you about this matter." Ronan stared at him and nodded slightly. As if a stone fell to the ground, Dick let out a big breath. "Sir, I understand. I will play the role of Reinhardt well. Because of the existence of Reinhardt, I must also play this role well. Even if a shot is cut, it doesn't matter 100 times." Back home, Luo Ning was lying on the sofa playing with his mobile phone. Sure enough, Winston made headlines again. The last time he and the Hulk beat Abomination was still vivid in his memory, and now he beat the Whip to death again, and netizens talked a lot about it. In the comments below the news, the answer with the most likes warmed Luo Ning's heart. "I will not dwell on the origins of Soldier 76 and Winston, even if they came from outer space. I only know that they sacrificed themselves to protect us and contributed to the maintenance of world peace. We are not qualified to question them. Instead of worrying about their threat to the United States, it is better to pay attention to the riots around the country. I think the United States can develop better in this way." The same is true for the comment with the second highest praise. Luo Ning feels that his efforts are not in vain. Although his starting point is not for the so-called maintenance of world peace. He admits that he is a selfish person, but he did what the army can't do, protect everyone by the way. Without him, the Abomination would definitely be subdued by Hulk, but the damage caused would be 100 times that of before, including human lives. Without him, Whiplash would surely have been subdued by Iron Man, but it would have caused worse incidents and also caused greater damage. Luo Ning thinks that it is good for someone to understand him. Most of the comments think that the existence of Winston and Soldier 76 is very good, but there are also some comments that reveal an atmosphere of concern for the country and the people, just like Soldier 76. Like what a heinous thing Winston had done. Luo Ning really wanted to say to these keyboard warriors, why didn't you come out when everyone was in danger? Why didn't you come out when the country was in distress? Open your mouth and come. The so-called patriots and people on the internet are mostly like this. When the people around them are in danger, they may run faster than anyone else. When the war is really starting, if they don't carry guns and fight for the country, they will just run around. Luo Ning didn't have the strength to compete with these keyboard warriors. He never did those things for these people to see. Those who understand will naturally understand. It will be quiet for a while. Making a good movie is what he needs to focus on. The other side. After the last operation and Hawkeye's report summary, Nick Fury temporarily relieved Soldier 76 and Winston, and Tony also found a solution to palladium poisoning from his father's private property. Palladium has been replaced by a new element, which has no harm to the body. Now, he wants to think about how to draw Iron Man into the Avengers. It has been half a year since he had this idea, but the team still hasn't been established, not even a single member. Thinking about it, it's a bit awkward. The world is not peaceful anymore. A powerful mysterious force has emerged in the charming place of New Mexico. This force obviously does not belong to the Earth, so he asked Coulson to investigate on the spot. The Avengers Alliance needs to be established as soon as possible, starting with attracting Iron Man. Fury walked, and the agents on both sides of the door of the red brick house nodded to him. In an empty house, Tony was sitting at the table, feeling so bad that he was allowed to wait for someone in such a crude place. However, there was no way, without the help of this one-eyed guy, he might have died, even if it was a favor. Just when Tony was getting impatient, Fury came in. He took out a document to Tony and said lightly, "This is Agent Romanov's assessment of you. Read it." Tony opened the document, scanned a few lines, and said, "Personality overview, Mr. Stark has shown compulsive behavior." Tony frowned slightly, then looked at Fury, and defended himself. "I have to say, that was last week." Fury didn't say anything, just stared at him like that. Tony continued to read, "There is a tendency to self-destruct. I was going to die at the time." After finishing speaking, he looked at Fury again. "Please, besides, don't we all have a little bit?" Continue reading, talking to himself, with a bit of surprise in his tone, standard narcissist. Tony looked at Fury again, nodded, "That's right. Okay, now to the main content." Tony continued. "Avengers recruiting assessment, Iron Man, yes." He closed the file. "I have to think about it. Aren't they just trying to recruit him?" Fury agrees, but he may not agree. After all, it will limit his personal freedom. Fury looked at him deeply. "Keep reading." Tony didn't know what drug he was selling in his gourd, so he opened the file and read on. "Tony Stark, no, not recommended." Tony wondered, shook his head and said, "It doesn't make sense. Why do you approve of me and disapprove of me?" It's uncomfortable to be rejected. Even if he doesn't want to join the Avengers, he still needs to be approved by S.H.I.E.L.D. He doesn't allow others to easily deny him. "I have a new heart, I want to treat Pepper well, I'm talking about a fairly stable relationship." Tony felt that his condition was very good and perfect. Why couldn't he catch Fury's eyes? Fury got up from his seat, walked slowly to the table and sat down, staring at Tony condescendingly, and said slowly, "So we think that at present we'd better only ask you to be a consultant." An advisor again. Tony still remembers the last time Agent Coulson asked him to be a consultant to S.H.I.E.L.D., but he rejected him, so this time it's obvious. He looked at Fury and said seriously, "You can't afford me. Besides, I'm organized. I believe you have heard its name." Tony got up and left, and only after walking to the door did he say in an orderly manner, "Although the base hasn't been established yet, it does exist, and that is Overwatch." In fact, this is just a wording of his rejection of Fury. He does not want to be restricted by weird organizations. Overwatch is only an organization that exists in movies so far. Even if Soldier 76 and Winston appear, no, Overwatch won't be able to build for a while. With this cover, he can reject all invitations related to the organization. If you want Iron Man to work, it is impossible in this life. 3 months passed in a flash, and the filming of Reinhardt was completed. During the filming, Luo Ning only went to the set twice, one time because he wanted to see if Dick's Reinhardt had improved. On that visit, Dick did not disappoint him, and performed it very carefully. Sometimes the director didn't say anything, he himself asked to start over and strive for perfection. The second time I went, it was to add Easter eggs to the next film. At this time, a lot of Luo Ning's brain cells would die, and he would sit in the study for a whole week before thinking about the content of the Easter egg, the next hero, which made Luo Ning look forward to it. Because that is really a hero who is worth 1,000. Once he finds a good position, his output will be extremely terrifying. This big killer will definitely play a decisive role in the New York War. Luo Ning sat on the sofa and smacked his tongue. Thinking of this, he was a little excited. Now that the trailer was released on the official website of Overwatch Films, it was still at 5 p.m. Luo Ning watched it on his notebook. In fact, he has watched it many times. Now he just wants to watch it with the fans, and also to see if those idiots have fiddled with the official website. The official website collapsed as expected, but he was not in a hurry, and refreshed the web page calmly. The ones who should be anxious should be those programmers. With the lessons learned from Winston's trailer last time, those guys who have the same program apes should be able to grow snacks. To receive such a high salary, you have to prove that you have the ability to receive such a high salary. Sure enough, after refreshing again, the web page returned to normal. Those programmers didn't dare to compete with their own golden rice bowl after all, and they stayed in front of the computer one by one and didn't go anywhere. They put all their energy into releasing today's trailer, just to prevent the tragedy of half a year ago from happening again. If they did it again, they might be fired. The trailer for Reinhardt edits out all the sparks in the film, and it looks like the blood is boiling without a second of nonsense. Even though this is the 10th time Luo Ning has watched it, he doesn't feel bored. On the contrary, he looks forward to the movie's release, and I believe those fans feel the same way. However, what he didn't know was that the performances of movie fans all over the world were not only excited, but also crazy about it. In the university dormitory, a boy hugged a pillow and stared at the computer engrossed. In the video, Reinhardt held up the Warhammer and smashed the Omnic robots. The boy was so excited that he smashed the pillow in his arms at the sleeping roommate and shouted, "Sleep with the hammer, sleep with the hammer. Wake up and watch the Reinhardt trailer." In the cozy new home, the girl is snuggling in the arms of the boy, watching the trailer together on the tablet. When the girl saw Reinhardt holding up the shield and leading the German soldiers to charge, she excitedly grabbed her boyfriend's arm and then pinched her boyfriend hard. She didn't realize her behavior after pinching, but turned her face excitedly looking at her boyfriend, so handsome, so manly. The boy could only curl his lips at this, and then smiled helplessly. In the evening self-study in high school, men and women at the same table wear a pair of headphones, bury their heads under the pile of books, watch the trailer under the teacher's nose, see Randian, want to shout, but dare not, can only he clenched his fists to suppress the excitement in his heart. At the end of the 3-minute short film, the two took off their earphones at the same time, looked up and smiled at each other, and they could see satisfaction in each other's eyes, mixed with a hint of unsatisfactory meaning. All of these are present all over the world. Even Tony was watching the trailer at the moment, and he was also excited. He didn't expect that the new movie would tell about such a powerful hero. The battle armor is extremely eye-catching, and the Warhammer also has a strong sense of technology, but what really interests him are those robots, the lifeless war robots that brought the Omnic crisis to the world. After watching it, Tony couldn't help thinking, does this kind of robot that is out of control and only knows how to start a war really exist? One thing is certain, if it exists, the world will face a huge threat. But he is confident that if this kind of robot can really be manufactured, then, it must be from him, Tony Stark, the greatest mechanic and inventor in the United States. Once the leader of the industry, now under the impact of Overwatch films, the company as a whole is a bit depressed, but today, the employees of the company are all working hard. Success or failure depends on one action. Wancheng will face Shuang Films head-on. Knowing that Overwatch's new movie, Reinhardt, will be released in the near future, Wancheng will not skip the schedule, but it will be released on the same schedule as Reinhardt. The purpose is obvious, just to prove yourself. The outside world is not optimistic about their behavior, but Mr. Kino Cromwell, the CEO of Universal Films, has incomparable self-confidence. After the last superhero movie hit the street, Cromwell calmed down, calmly analyzed the elements of the success of the Overwatch series of movies, and repeatedly studied Mr. Luo Ning's speech at the International Film Summit. When Luo Ning gave a speech before, he asked his employees to extract every word that Luo Ning said. This note made him understand the essence of commercial movies. Therefore, the painstaking work, Beastmaster, around the city was born. This film, which has been carefully prepared for a year, is the key to his recovery in the film market. When he was filming Winston at Overwatch Pictures, Wancheng was filming Beastmaster and Winston at Overwatch Pictures. Around the time of Reinhardt, Universal was still filming Beastmaster. Not seeking efficiency, only seeking quality. Cromwell checked it himself and invited the best screenwriter, well, not the best. Of course he hoped to hire Ronan. But this is unrealistic, it is impossible for others to write scripts for him. Moreover, they are competitors. Even if Luo Ning writes scripts for him, he is not at ease. It's better to hire a screenwriter who has written scripts for many blockbuster movies. As for the director, he even recruited director Vernon Burt, the director who filmed Winston for Overwatch films. In fact, it can't be regarded as digging. After all, director Burt is not a dedicated director of Overwatch pictures. Compared to director Burt, he hopes to invite director Hopkins. After all, director Hopkins is recognized as the most powerful director. Not to mention that every film he made is a hit, at least the word of mouth of each film all are good, and the box office is also very good. The 2 Overwatch series movies he made were both word of mouth box office hits, which established the position of director Hopkins in the film industry. However, director Hopkins has been on vacation abroad after filming Iron Man, and never talked about work. Even if he paid nearly double the salary, he still couldn't hire this big director with a lot of heirs. Overwatch films gave him too much money, fame, prestige, none of them were missing. If before filming Soldier 76, director Hopkins was only a well-known director in the United States, barely squeezed into the ranks of first-line directors, then now, Hopkins is a world-renowned director, with a detached position in the film industry, truly super line. Not only him, but other film companies have also hired director Hopkins, and without exception, they all failed. It seems that this great director now only accepts films from Overwatch Films and doesn't bother to cooperate with other film companies. The most important thing is that he doesn't worry about making money. Please don't move this one, so I have to settle for the next best thing, please director Burt. Director Burt has directed Winston, but it is somewhat similar in style to Beastmaster, in that beasts possess human wisdom. Thinking of this, Cromwell scratched his head and became very irritable. Those media were too bad. When the news about Beastmaster was released some time ago, there were all kinds of slander from unscrupulous media. Shocked, Mr. Cromwell, the CEO of Universal Pictures, actually did these things behind Mr. Luo Ning's back. Shame on the play. Universal Films' new movie, Beastmaster, plagiarized Winston. In many ways, it's a real hit. Universal Films, once the overlord of the film industry, actually plagiarized Winston in the new movie, Beastmaster, don't want billion. Remarks like this are everywhere on the internet, and if he competes, he will be pissed off. A bunch of uneducated editors. Cromwell snuffed out his cigarette. Can paying tribute be called plagiarism? Yangchun Baishui is art, and Sha Liba people are also art. Afterwards, Cromwell thought carefully about what he had just read, and the more he thought about it, the more reasonable he felt. In the past, he was too addicted to himself, making movies that he thought were elegant and connotative, but the audience didn't buy it, and stories that are lower-level people and close to life may be more popular. The door was pushed open and a woman entered with a steaming cup of coffee. Walking to the desk, a hand trembled accidentally, and a drop of coffee splashed on the paper. Cromwell sat up in shock, quickly picked up the paper, wiped it dry with a suit cuff worth thousands of dollars, then glared at the assistant and said, "Miranda, what are you doing so carelessly?" He has to take out this note and read it several times a day. Every time he reads it, he will gain something new. Although he doesn't want to admit it, Luo Ning is indeed an excellent producer and has a keen sense of the market. The speech was also full of dry goods. Without this note, he wouldn't wake up, and Beastmaster wouldn't be so perfect. With Beastmaster, he is confident of catching up with Overwatch and then surpassing it. No one can shake his position in the film industry. Even the dark horse Overwatch films will only be a flash in the pan. In terms of strength and background, it is far inferior to Wancheng. Wancheng will eventually take back the movie market from Shuang Pictures. The female assistant was trembling, apologized quickly, and then gently put down the coffee cup. She didn't expect that when a small drop of coffee was spilled, the boss's reaction would be so violent, as if that piece of paper was his lifeblood, and he didn't hesitate to wipe it with a suit worth thousands of dollars. It was too much of a fuss. Of course, she only dared to think in her heart and didn't dare to say it out loud. She also knew that the boss was under a lot of pressure recently. Over the past few years, the film market was occupied by Overwatch films. The benefits of Wancheng were getting lower and lower. Achievements have been made. Forget it, let the technical department release the trailer quickly. Don't let Reinhardt take the limelight for too long. and then let the operation department carry out the routine process. You know, the bigger the discussion on the internet, the better, Cromwell ordered. Under the light of Reinhardt, Beastmaster was completely covered up, so he wanted to create momentum to make Beastmaster shine more intensely, and he didn't hesitate to spend more money for this. Anyway, he is giving it a go. Whether he succeeds or not depends on the performance of this movie. Okay, sir. Miranda nodded lightly, and walked out of the office lightly. After watching the trailer of Reinhardt, out of curiosity, Cromwell's eyes flashed, and he muttered confidently, "What kind of bullshit plot? My Beastmaster will definitely be able to surpass your Reinhardt heart." Poor Wancheng is aggressive, but Luo Ning is half leaning on the sofa, eating snacks and fruits, and brushing beans happily. From the moment he took over Overwatch Films, he ignored other film companies. His competitor was never other film companies, but himself. How to break through himself was what he needed to consider. But Luo Ning didn't feel any pressure. He was very confident in the movies he made. The source of this confidence was naturally those excellent scripts. It must be said that he was very competent as a script porter. Facts have also proved that other film companies do not have the strength to compete with Overwatch Films. From the performance of the past 2 years, it can be seen that the top 3 films with the highest box office in the world are all films under Overwatch Films. Reinhardt, after its release, it is no problem to occupy the top 4. In addition to the discussion on Do Banshang's own Reinhardt, another movie also aroused his idea. Beastmaster. This is really the first time Luo Ning has heard of this movie. I haven't seen it a few days ago, but today it suddenly became more popular. Apart from Douban, other media platforms also talked about it a lot, and it was even on Google's hot search. If Cromwell knew about this, Cromwell might be pissed off. He regarded Ronan as a competitor, but Ronan hadn't even heard of Beastmaster, so he didn't like him. The strongest competitor is in the eyes. Curious, Luo Ning searched the internet and found out that the producer of this movie called Beastmaster is Wancheng Film Company. Cromwell, Luo Ning murmured, then grinned, and then clicked on a piece of news at random. The title was very attractive. Shocked. Let's recount the unknown stories between Cromwell and Mr. Luo Ning. I have to say that this title made him a little interested, so he clicked on it. Mr. Kino Cromwell, CEO of Ring City Films, delivered a speech at the Beastmaster film conference, saying that Beastmaster is a superhero movie that they have spent a year shooting carefully and investing hundreds of millions of dollars, and threatened to catch up with Overwatch. The film industry has become the benchmark for a new generation of superhero movies. A picture and a short video are attached below. The picture shows Cromwell standing in front of the microphone giving a passionate speech, with a very bright expression. His mouth is wide open, and his eyes are wide open, as if the audience in the audience made him angry. Listen to influx. Curiosity drove Luo Ning to click on the short video. Well, when he opened it, he heard Cromwell's passionate speech. Luo Ning quickly lowered the volume, and there were spittle-like machine guns, which almost killed people. Beastmaster is the brainchild of Ring. It's a superhero movie, and when you think of superheroes, you're bound to think of Overwatch, Soldier 76 and Winston, but what I'm saying is, Overwatch, those films made by the film industry are blindly pursuing visual effects, but the connotation is very empty. This kind of film is enough to watch once, and it is not worth pondering. But the Beastmaster around the city is different. It is a new generation of superhero movies. He is the #1 producer in the world. The moment the voice fell, there was warm applause from the audience. Everyone knew who Cromwell was referring to, and it was obviously Overwatch Pictures, which was in full swing. Undoubtedly, Cromwell set a very stupid flag for himself, taking ignorance as fearlessness. After reading it, Luo Ning didn't feel any turmoil in his heart. He even wanted to laugh a little bit. If he made such a big noise, wouldn't he be afraid of screwing up? He clearly remembered that Wancheng followed Xu Wang's first superhero movie, but it completely hit the market. Not to mention the poor box office, a group of Wancheng's old fans have also turned into new fans of Xu Wang. This move now is just a stubborn fight, but in the end, don't make your face swollen. News and articles about Beastmaster emerged one after another, and they were generally positive. Luo Ning naturally knew that Wancheng was promoting the film, including Do Ban, who originally talked about Reinhardt, overwhelmingly, but now it has become polarized, with some praising Reinhardt and some praising Beastmaster. This kind of situation is very rare. Luo Ning has never seen a movie that dared to compete with the most popular, Reinhardt, under pressure. Isn't this obviously a thrill? For this reason, he also found out that the premiere date of Beastmaster and Reinhardt were only one day apart. There is a kind. Luo Ning felt a little admiration. There were not many men who dared to confront him just now, and Cromwell was one of them, which showed that Cromwell was very confident in his movie. Originally, he didn't intend to waste time on things that had nothing to do with him, but as a respect for his competitors, Luo Ning opened the Beastmaster trailer with a hint of curiosity. First, a narration. The X virus is spreading, and the situation on the Earth is getting serious. In order to develop a drug that can effectively kill the X virus, scientists use a group of tigers for experiments. ? Inexplicably familiar. Luo Ning thought for a while, and then slapped his thigh. Isn't this the opening of Winston? Scientists are also doing experiments. The only difference is that Winston is to find another planet suitable for human survival, and the test object is a gorilla, while Beastmaster is to develop medicine and the test object is a tiger. Then looking down, Luo Ning's brows relaxed slightly. Fortunately, the plot later was different. It probably means that among the batch of tigers that were developed, one tiger mutated and possessed human thinking ability and command. Moreover, the blood flowing from it can kill the X virus. I don't know the follow-up plot, and the trailer only explained this. Luo Ning thinks that the special effects are good, as expected of being the leader in the past. The production level is still good. It's the plot. How should I put it? It borrowed from Winston at the beginning, which made the subsequent plots a little bit unable to get rid of Winston shadow. It's hard to make a comment without watching the full movie, but Luo Ning wants to see what Douban's reviews are like. The masterpiece around the city, Beastmaster, will definitely beat Reinhardt, let's argue. I've seen the trailers of Reinhardt and Beastmaster. I think Beastmaster is of good quality, but there is a bit of Winston in it, which greatly limits the development of its story, so Beastmaster won't explode Overwatch's movies, whether it's word of mouth or box office. Beastmaster plagiarized Winston, and even threatened to catch up with Overwatch pictures. Go home and sleep. Watch and watch every day, and the watch is your father. A group of people who only know how to pick a thorn in an egg, have the strengths of the Beastmaster been eaten by you? I hope your efforts will be rewarded accordingly, Cromwell. Luo Ning smiled slightly. It is obvious that Wancheng has spent a lot of money this time. Before the Overwatch series of movies were released, they were all slaughtered in Douban, but this time, Beastmaster took up half of the country. There is a trend, but it is not a skill to hire a navy. Giving back to fans. Luo Ning picked up the phone and was stunned to hear the news. Yes sir, Overwatch Films holds it once a year. This is a rule. This event is actually very simple. It is to draw a lucky fan to watch the premiere of Reinhardt with you. Lucy said. But I don't want to. I'm so embarrassed to watch movies with strangers. Lucy said solemnly. Mr. Luo Ning, this is already the biggest concession we have made. Apart from this, I believe you are even less willing to participate in other activities. What other activities? Tell me. Same as last time, interact with fans at the scene and send out posters signed by yourself. Luo Ning rubbed his forehead. He was almost exhausted from the activity last time, so he had no choice but to say, okay, you arrange it. On the premiere day of Reinhardt, Ronan got information from a lucky fan. She is a 17-year-old female high school student. It sounds pretty good. Students are always easier to get along with than people who have left the society. The age difference is not too big, so there is a generation gap, and there will be no barriers to communication. However, when I came to the company, I didn't see that fan, but I saw Tony Stark. Ronan looked at Lucy suspiciously, and the latter's eyes dodged and fell on Tony. He then looked at Tony, frowned and said, don't tell me you're that schoolgirl. Of course I'm not that schoolgirl, I just bought luck from that schoolgirl. Tony grinned. Well, you're lucky. Luo Ning shrugged and didn't say much. Tony is okay, he is an old friend and we can chat. I'm very interested in the movie, Reinhardt, second only to Iron Man. In addition, I have something to ask you, and it just happened to be a sweepstakes event for Overwatch films to give back to fans, so take this opportunity to watch a movie and chat with you, killing two birds with one stone. Tony clapped his hands, thinking he was cool. Looking at his current state, Luo Ning knew that he had found a new element to replace palladium, got rid of the troubles caused by palladium poisoning, and was as happy as a child weighing more than 100 catties. Then, this lucky fan, please come in. Ronan held out his arm to let him go first. Shuwang Films temporarily set up a screening room just for this event, but it is no worse than a movie theater. The main thing is that it is quiet and no one disturbs, but the room is empty and a bit cold. The sofa chairs are comfortable to sit on, and the table in front is full of food, such as chicken tenders, French fries, burgers, fruits, coffee, juice. There are all kinds of food and drinks, all of which are freshly made and still steaming. Luo Ning zipped up his jacket, tightened his collar, and sat on the sofa. Without his greeting, Tony sat down and his eyes lit up. Whoa, there are hamburgers to eat. Picking up one casually, he glanced at the ingredients in the folder: beef patties, cheese slices, lettuce, and tomato sauce. Tony nodded, and said with satisfaction, not bad, it's my favorite cheeseburger. After speaking, he opened his mouth wide and took a bite. Luo Ning was also hungry, so he picked up a bag of French fries and ate them. He drank a sip of orange juice and ate French fries. This is how life should be, with a sweet taste on his lips and teeth. A hamburger? Tony asked as he ate, picking up one and handing it to him. Luo Ning shook his head. Cheeseburgers are not his style, it is okay to remove the cheese slices. In the end, I still took it. It's not good for Tony to keep holding it like this. He who has always hated cheese looked at the hamburger and felt a desire to eat it. There seemed to be a voice in his heart saying, eat it. Take a bite carefully and chew lightly, for fear of biting the cheese, which will destroy the overall deliciousness. How delicious. Even with the cheese, which was always unpalatable, he still found it delicious. Before Tony could finish eating, he ate a hamburger. So what did you pretend to me just now? Tony felt that he was hypocritical. He obviously ate more deliciously than him, but just now he pretended to be constipated, as if forcing him to eat mustard. Luo Ning felt a little weird. He discovered this problem some time ago, but he just didn't pay attention to it. The food that I didn't like to eat before, but now I feel it as a delicacy that I have never tasted before. Is it possible that some kind of incredible attribute has awakened in the body? After thinking about it, Luo Ning finally found the problem. After activating Winston's shape change for a month, he can eat no matter what kind of food it is. It seems that his appetite has been completely awakened in that month. The frequency of frequent insomnia is therefore reduced. It is estimated that the vitamin B in the body has been supplemented, so it is better not to be picky about food. After a while, the screening room was filled with the aroma of food. Lucy frowned, realizing that things were not simple, as if the two of them were not here to watch a movie, but to eat, and one ate more than the other, making her hungry. Mr. Luo Ning, is it showing now? The projectionist watched them eat, smelled the fragrance, swallowed his saliva again and again, and couldn't help it. Luo Ning glanced at his watch. Wait another 2 minutes, the screening will be on time at 8 o'clock. Although the body is not by the side of the majority of movie fans, but the heart is there, and being excited by a movie plot at the same time, and being moved by a plot at the same time, this is enough. Okay, sir. After the projectionist nodded, he walked away lightly, walked outside the door and took a few deep breaths, barely suppressing his appetite. It's so disgusting. These guys, who usually dismiss so many delicious food and drink, just watch movies and eat non-stop, as if they were reincarnated from starving ghosts. It's definitely the saddest he's ever shown a movie. Hey Lucy, don't leave, stay and watch together, it's boring if there are few people. Luo Ning said. That's not good. Lucy glanced at Ronan and then at Tony, which meant a lot. It's nothing bad, Ms. Barrett, just me and Ronan, it's too monotonous. After finishing speaking, Tony took a sip of Kuo Luo, with a satisfied expression on his face. There are all movies and food, and there is only one beauty missing. In fact, he wanted to bring Pepper, but there is only one lucky fan, so it is not good to bring another person, so as not to break the rules. Seeing that Tony had no objections, Lucy also joined the ranks. Sitting next to Luo Ning, after 3 minutes of being reserved, Luo Ning and Tony still ate on their own, without any intention of greeting her, so she unceremoniously gnawed on the chicken wings. She had no time to eat after a busy day, but she was starved to death. She couldn't be hungry for the sake of face, that would be too stupid. In front of the huge screen, the three of them were all buried in their food. The projection room turned into a eating and drinking party, and the screen was once unbearable to look at. It wasn't until the lights went out and the screen in front of them came on that they all took out tissues to wipe their mouths and hands clean, then leaned comfortably on the soft sofa, twisted their bodies, adjusted to the most comfortable posture, and got ready to watch the movie. In the center of the screen, a bright butt logo appeared, and immediately after, the letters, Overwatch, appeared. The shiny Overwatch logo appeared on the screen, and fans all over the world were extremely excited. The long-awaited Reinhardt is finally here. At the beginning of the story, it was a war full of gunfire. German soldiers put on armor to defend against enemy invasion. As the trump card of the German army, the Crusaders, they also appeared on the battlefield, sometimes turning into functional teammates who supported their shields to protect their comrades, and sometimes turning into brave warriors who charged into battle, once frightened the enemy and fled. The Crusader Company is composed of a group of soldiers with extremely strong physical fitness. They wear heavy armor and wield huge warhammers, appearing like steel giants on the battlefield. However, due to material and technological reasons, armor and warhammers cannot be mass-produced, so only a small number of soldiers became Crusaders. It is precisely because of this small part that the loss of the war can be minimized and the enemy can be repelled in one fell swoop. The battle was over and the German soldiers returned to their barracks. A young Crusader took off his helmet, revealing a handsome face, and his blonde hair was even more chic. This one is naturally the protagonist, Reinhard Wilhelm. Ordinary soldiers walked in supporting each other, and looked at his silver armor with envy. It was this armor that was 100 times stronger than the body armor that allowed the Crusaders to survive the hail of bullets. A group of enemies who were too weak, they fell down before I tried my best. Reinhard doesn't care about his injured teammates and only brags about how good he is. At this time, another Crusader walked in. He has a bald head, a thick beard on his lips, extending to his chin, a golden battle armor makes him look mighty, the slender down at the neckline is slightly swaying, the most eye-catching is the golden coat of arms on his right shoulder. The coat of arms is in the shape of a shield, with a simple drawing of the wings of a griffin, which proves that his position in the Crusaders is quite extraordinary. When he came in, those soldiers shouted respectfully, "Colonel Baldridge." Baldridge nodded and smiled, and asked how their injuries were with concern. Then Reinhardt came over and said with a playful smile, "Old man, do you think there will be stronger enemies appearing? Those guys are too boring." Baldridge immediately scowled, and angrily said, "Reinhardt, do you know that because of your unauthorized charge, several soldiers were directly exposed to the hail of bullets? I am absolutely sure that I will kill the enemy before they shoot. Facts have proved that my temporary decision is correct. Otherwise, when they kill others with poor marksmanship, they will have to wait until the year of the monkey." Reinhardt glanced at the comrades around him with a trace of disdain. It was enough to have their Crusaders on the battlefield, and it would be a burden to take these soldiers without armor for self-defense. There is no doubt that Reinhardt was scolded by Baldridge, and his armor was confiscated, allowing him to participate in a battle as an ordinary soldier. It wasn't until after that battle that Reinhardt realized how dangerous the situation for ordinary soldiers would be without the protection of shields. Of course, the heat was only 3 minutes, and he restrained a little in the future battles, but he still couldn't change his impatience. He wanted to prove himself too much in the war, and would often charge alone regardless of his teammates. But fortunately, wars come and go quickly. The enemy was afraid of the German Crusaders and suffered heavy casualties, so they retreated to their lair. In the next few years, Germany has been in a state of calm. Baldridge enjoys his current life, but Reinhardt is restless, always looking forward to something that some country can do. Thus, the global disaster, the Omnic Crisis, was expected by him. Human beings have made great progress in science and technology, among which artificial intelligence is naturally a major symbol of technological development. As the so-called war promotes the development of science and technology, the development of science and technology makes people lazy. The abuse of artificial intelligence eventually led to the loss of control of these artificial intelligences. They grew up on their own and then controlled the heavy weapons of destruction made by humans, just like Skynet depicted in Terminator. Thus, the Omnic crisis broke out. This turning point brings the film to a climax. At first, Omnics were still within the controllable range, and the armies of various countries destroyed the robots that only knew to destroy, but something unexpected happened. The Omnics artificial intelligence machines were able to mass-produce military robots, trying to destroy human beings. A large number of military robots launched wars, and the countries were overwhelmed, and the people fell into endless panic. On the screen, a dense army of robots attacked and massacred human soldiers without any emotion. Movie fans all over the world couldn't help but bring them in. If they were from that world, they would probably be lost. The governments of various countries failed to prevent the attack of the intelligent machines, so the United Nations created an international peacekeeping organization to fight against the intelligent machines. This organization is called Overwatch. Overwatch accepts the best and most elite talents from all over the world to launch a war of asymmetric strength around the robot army. Of course, there is no detailed description here, and it is not time for Overwatch to reveal it. Germany is naturally also fighting against Omnics, and the Crusaders, as Germany's killer, are an indispensable part. Eichenwald, an abandoned town on the outskirts of Stuttgart. An ancient castle stands here, and the low houses around it make the castle extremely tall, but the place is desolate and desolate. Baldridge received the mission to lead his soldiers here to meet the arrival of war robots. Melodious music sounded in the abandoned bar, which was the tranquility before the storm. The soldiers drank the wine and enjoyed the short time. "Old man, have you decided? Do you really want to leave us?" Reinhardt leaned against the bar, toyed with the Overwatch badge, and flicked it at Baldridge. Baldridge received the badge and said solemnly, "I have been called and must respond. This is a great honor." Reinhardt picked up the saber and carved his name on the bar counter, dismissing it, in order to join that what mysterious organization, abandoning my brother and giving up the glory of being a crusader, what kind of honor is this? He took a sip from his wine glass and continued, "The crusaders, but the great heroes who defended their home and country, will be immortal as sung in the song. Eternal is our cause, and this war is more important than all of us," Baldridge said loudly. At this time, a soldier hurried over. "Colonel Baldridge, there are airdrop pods to the east, and they are here." Baldridge clenched his fists and said with high spirits, "Okay guys, here comes the singers, bring your beautiful dance partners, and smash those tin cans." Reinhardt blinked at the soldiers beside him. The time to show off his heroic posture finally came. The two soldiers were very helpless. They didn't know when this guy would ignore them again and charge forward alone. Before the battle, Reinhardt brought the rocket hammer for Baldridge and said with a smile, "Don't forget your walking stick, old man." Baldridge took the heavy hammer and laughed boldly, "Born for honor." Reinhardt took his palm and responded confidently, "Ha! Die for glory." Chapter 71. Live for glory, die for glory. Hearing this sentence, the blood of fans all over the world boiled. Baldridge led the two crusaders to the front, propped up the blue light shield, and provided an absolutely safe combat environment for his comrades. "Stay in formation," Baldridge commanded everyone. The barrier of the three crusaders was like a hard barrier, protecting ordinary soldiers from harm. Hundreds of war robots are like walking corpses, attacking in a leisurely manner, countless bullets poured on the light shield, unable to penetrate. "Bazooka ready, fire," Baldridge shouted. A soldier carried a rocket launcher on his shoulder, and with one shot, he killed 4 or 5 robots at once, and the battle was proceeding in an orderly manner. On the other hand, on Reinhardt's side, ordinary soldiers only dared to hide behind low bunkers, and did not dare to show their heads at all, being pressed by countless robots. Regardless of the calls of his comrades, Reinhardt rushed into the pile of robots, crushed them with his hard armor, and smashed them flat with a rocket hammer. Reinhardt felt great after solving dozens or hundreds of robots at once, ha ha ha. "I love the smell of this wind." At this time, Baldridge came and said in an orderly tone, "Go back and protect your teammates." Regardless of the order, Reinhardt rushed up again, raised a heavy hammer and smashed a robot into scrap iron, and said calmly, "They will only delay, don't worry, they are fine." However, those soldiers were beaten so hard that they didn't even dare to show their heads, so they could only hide behind the ruins. One soldier held his head and shouted, "Where is Reinhardt?" They needed Reinhardt's protection, but Reinhardt rushed into the enemy group by himself. Seeing this, many movie fans felt a little sad. Reinhardt didn't behave like a protagonist. He was aggressive, free and undisciplined. He abandoned his teammates and rushed in alone, just to prove his own strength. But Luo Ning wants to say that this kind of protagonist is more real. The protagonist is never perfect. It is because of imperfection that some things happen to make him perfect, and thus transform into a superhero-like character. In the air, several things fell quickly, and with a boom, they smashed the ground out of the hole. Then, a robot stepped out of the pit, and its appearance was very different from ordinary robots. There are 4 small red lights acting as eyes on the face, 2 machine guns on the shoulders, a large machine gun attached to the left arm, and 4 mechanical legs. "What's that?" the soldier exclaimed. Although it looks like a centaur, they know that this guy has nothing to do with a centaur, it's just an iron lump that can only kill. Reinhardt's eyes lit up. "That belongs to me." The propeller nozzle behind the battle armor ignited flames, and this powerful boost pushed him up at a very fast speed. "Come back, Reinhardt," Baldridge yelled. Reinhardt had already rushed up, blocked the bullet with his arm, and hit it with his head buried. However, he was surprised to find that this robot was not knocked away by him like other robots, but blocked him. Reinhardt raised his head, his eyes revealing a little surprise. The robot lifted him up and threw him, and the right arm swung down, and a fiery blade appeared, slashing at Reinhardt. This battle is closely tied to the hearts of the audience. Although they know that this is Reinhardt's mistake, they don't want Reinhardt to be harmed. These robots that can only destroy need to be sent to hell. Reinhardt tried his best to dodge, but he was still cut. A bright red vertical knife wound passed through the eyeball in his left eye, which looked very scary. Robots of this kind have also appeared elsewhere. "We're dying," said the other Crusaders. Baldridge ordered, "Withdraw to the assembly point, and Reinhardt will be handed over to me." Baldridge rushed up boldly, smashed the robot, and saved Reinhardt, but he was slashed in the waist. Reinhardt said bluntly, "I can handle it. I can tell." Baldridge said lightly, moved the palm covering his waist, saw the blood on it, did not expect that the blade could penetrate the armor and cut his body. The audience was extremely worried. Reinhardt was too reckless, and he would not have done this step by step. If he insisted on showing off, not only himself was injured, but Baldridge was also injured. At this time, the other 2 centaur-like robots came and cooperated with the ordinary robots to launch a huge offensive. Reinhardt and Baldridge had no choice but to escape, hid in the castle, closed the heavy gate, and bought a little breathing time. "The gate won't last long. Go back and assemble, I'll hold them back." Baldridge clutched the knife wound on his waist, he knew he couldn't bear it for long. Reinhardt walked and turned around and said, "Ha, then all the credit goes to you. Hee, we will definitely be able to fight back, let's go together." Baldridge put down the hammer, took off his helmet, panted unsteadily, "No, I want to stay here." "What, without you?" Only then did Reinhardt realize that Baldridge was injured, and he had mixed feelings for a moment, especially uncomfortable. Baldridge yelled at him, "Soldier, you swore to be loyal to the Crusaders, fulfill your oath." He held out his armor-covered hand to Reinhardt. Boom, boom. The gate was about to be shattered by the bombardment. Reinhardt took a look and knew that if he left, Baldridge would probably die, so he said stubbornly, I won't leave. Teammates need you to be their shield." Baldridge looked at him and said. Reinhardt was tangled in his heart, and finally stood on the side of Daya. He stretched out his hand to hold Baldridge's palm, and when he let go, he saw the Overwatch badge on his palm. "Reinhardt, live for honor." Reinhardt held the hammer tightly, and handed it to Baldridge. Baldridge took the heavy hammer, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. This time, Reinhardt finally didn't act rashly. Reinhardt turned around reluctantly, to die for glory, old friend. When Reinhardt left, the door was broken open. Baldridge put on his helmet, held rocket hammers in both hands, activated his battle armor, and his light blue eyes suddenly lit up. The 2 heavy hammers ignited flames, and the thrusters behind him also ignited flames. The 3 major assists made him rush to the group of robots without hesitation, and built a solid city wall with his life. The audience was moved. Baldridge, this move must be sacrificed for righteousness, he is the hero. Outside the castle, the soldiers were beaten helplessly by the robots. Reinhard propped up the barrier and rushed out. However, the firepower was so fierce that the barrier shattered within a few seconds. Reinhard used his body to block the bullets for the soldiers until the reinforcements arrived. In the castle, Baldridge got rid of the last robot and fell on the throne forever, his light blue armor eyes also dimmed. Although the body is dead, the mind is still there. Heroes live forever. In the subsequent battles, Reinhard never charged alone again, and always put up a shield to protect his teammates, keeping Baldridge's words in his heart. The Overwatch badge was Baldridge's last gift to him. Reinhard couldn't forget the old buddy's death, so after several major battles, he decided to join the organization that the old buddy wanted, Overwatch. This is the end of the film, and audiences from all over the world can't let go of it for a long time after watching it. Baldridge's death is the most difficult for them to accept. Perhaps this film explains a truth. A real hero is by no means a hero alone, but a team spirit that is willing to contribute. The death of Baldridge made Reinhard fully understand this truth. Perhaps, in Overwatch, Reinhard's team spirit can get the greatest value. The audience is full of expectations for future movies. They are very curious about what kind of stories will happen when the superheroes gather in Overwatch. Movie fans all over the world have developed a habit of watching Shuang movies and never leaving their seats until the last moment, because there are Easter eggs at the end. As soon as the screen turned, we came to a dim desert, with the breeze blowing and the sky filled with dust. A man walked forward with the brim of his hat down. Then he turned around abruptly, quickly pulled out the revolver at his waist, pointed the black muzzle in the direction of the audience, and with a bang, the bullet flew out. Immediately afterwards, there was the sound of the screen shattering, and the screen produced a shattering special effect. A group of spectators subconsciously shook their heads to dodge, it was too real. In the end, the man quickly retracted his gun, turned around and continued walking forward, and a faint voice sounded, "Justice will not do itself." This is the end of the film, and the fans are not satisfied. Presumably this man with only half of his face is the protagonist of the next movie, dressed in the style of a Western cowboy. Is the next movie going to be about a Western cowboy? Does justice not assert itself? What does this line mean? It sounds weird. Justice won't do itself. Mr. Luo Ning, what does this sentence mean? Lucy asked. Luo Ning replied. Justice is something that is done, of course it is not about doing it yourself. Lucy was still dazed and didn't know what it meant. Tony didn't care about this. After watching the movie, his mind was on those Omnics. This sci-fi movie can be said to be very close to reality, and I even have a feeling that Omnics really exist. Tony was a little shocked. He is the greatest mechanic in the United States, so he understands that this kind of Omnic may be able to be manufactured if the level of technology is sufficient. Maybe let him study for a year or two, and he will be able to create this kind of Omnic. Of course, the Omnic he created will firmly obey his orders, and it is impossible to launch a rebellion, and there will be an Omnic crisis like in the movie. The Omnic he created must be to protect the world, not to destroy it. As the most outstanding, best, and most handsome mechanic in the United States, how could he make such a low-level mistake? The Omnics I made don't listen to me. Still being attacked by the Omnics he made. That's not a mechanic, that's a second hand. Omnics don't exist. They are all conceived by me, so don't take them too seriously, fake ones are all fake. Luo Ning always felt that Tony was very interested in Omnics, and there was a glint in his eyes. He felt that Tony's head had already begun to consider the feasibility of creating Omnics. Ultron. This term suddenly appeared in Luo Ning's mind. Isn't Ultron just an Omnic? And it was an Omnic made by Tony himself, and Dr. Banner also helped during the manufacturing process. Mom. Thinking of Ultron, Luo Ning's scalp tingled for a while. This guy almost destroyed the Earth in the movie. This thing must never be born. Even if the original plot is followed, Ultron will eventually be wiped out, but the losses Ultron will bring to the Earth are unpredictable, and many civilians have lost their lives as a result. You don't understand, Luo Ning. I'm a mechanic, and I understand the principles. Artificial intelligence is very advanced now. With the help of machinery, it can indeed do many incredible things. It can replace human labor and liberate human hands. I have already done it so far. In this regard, the only difference from the movie is that the artificial intelligence in the movie is more powerful, it seems to have its own consciousness, and it understands that the meaning of its own existence is destruction. Tony recalled the plot of the movie in his mind. Yes, the only difference between the artificial intelligence mechanical creation he created and the Omnic is that the Omnic is smarter, and he can do whatever it takes to achieve the goal of destroying human beings, which he cannot do now. Once the artificial intelligence mechanical creation produces its own independent consciousness, then the Omnic will be born. That must be a wonderful work of art. In terms of AI, I still have to work harder. Ronan, thank you for your movie for bringing me the inspiration to create. Tony smiled and looked at Ronan. The movie inspired him, and the Omnic brought him the impetus for research and creation. Next, it was time for him to end this sloppy life and rush towards invention and creation. The Omnic will definitely be created by him. The difference from the movie is that the Omnic he created takes maintaining peace as his mission, and resolutely eradicates all obstacles that violate the concept of peace. As expected of Mr. Stark, watching movies can bring you creative inspiration. Lucy praised. Tony smiled at her, and nodded his head with his index finger. I think the script written by Mr. Luo Ning is great, with a big brain hole, Omnic, and it will definitely become an epic-making product. Tony, don't have such an idea. Omnics don't exist, and your research will only waste your time. Luo Ning was stunned for a while, and finally realized the seriousness of the problem, which imperceptibly promoted the development of the plot. If Tony started to study it from now on, Ultron might be born ahead of schedule. Who will clean up the mess? Want to cry but have no tears. Who the hell would have thought that Tony would have such flirtatious thoughts while watching a movie? But having said that, the essence of Ultron seems to be the Omnic, the individual with the only dominant consciousness. In Overwatch, Omnics can kill everything with the consciousness of destruction. In Marvel, Ultron can kill humans with the consciousness of maintaining peace. Their consciousness is even higher than the order of the Creator. It's not surprising that Tony came up with such an idea after seeing the Omnic in the movie, combined with his own research, but Ronan didn't want to do this, and there would be endless troubles. Don't worry, even if you can't create it, you can still accumulate experience. When the technological level reaches the level, the Omnic will eventually be born, and your movie will definitely become a reality. Tony realized that he had said something wrong, and quickly corrected it. Oh no, I mean, the Omnic technology in your movie will become a reality, but I will let the Omnic appear in the form of maintaining peace. Okay, thank you both for your hospitality and spending such a wonderful night with me, a lucky fan. After finishing speaking, Tony left, followed by Lucy, leaving only Ronan standing there, speechless, asking the sky. Luo Ning couldn't eat or sleep well these days, so he was worried that Tony would mess up Ultron. Even if the box office of Reinhardt hits a new high, it can't dilute his melancholy. Box office, awards, word of mouth, everything was within his expectations, but Tony's idea of flirting was beyond his expectation. In the end, I still enlighten myself. The soldiers come to cover up the water and the earth. As long as the sky doesn't fall down, it's no big deal. Anyway, he has no way to restrict Tony's actions. Wait until Tony develops the prototype of Ultron and then find a solution. For now, he still has to focus his energy elsewhere. The Easter egg of Reinhardt reveals the next Overwatch hero. Just like his dress, he is a chivalrous cowboy. Although only half of his face is exposed, players who have played Overwatch can recognize it at a glance. That's McCree. Once the hot guy activates his big move, the enemy will have to find a cover to hide. It sounds cool, but in fact, in most cases, McCree in the game will be instantly killed by the enemy as soon as he reads, "It's noon," which is very realistic and cruel. For a young McCree, speaking of being particularly cruel, as soon as the lines of the ultimate move are read out, it means that he is going to die. For every young McCree, there is a wish, that is, once the ultimate move is activated, 6 heads can be locked and then harvested in an instant. That feeling is very refreshing. Of course, many players have never experienced this refreshing feeling. However, there are reasons for players to operate the game, that's why McCree is so good. In reality, McCree is a desperado with superb marksmanship. His superb shooting skills are vividly displayed. Luo Ning felt that he was an old McRae, at least he could kill 2 or 3 people with his ultimate move, so he wouldn't pretend to be forceful and get instead. Alright, the obsession is over, let's think carefully about how to activate Reinhardt's transformation form now. One more transformation form of a hero is one more support. Reinhardt's shield is very useful in the battle. There seems to be no rule in activating the transformation of heroes. Activating Soldier 76 requires the belief value of fans all over the world to reach the standard. Soldier 76 in the movie has the belief that peace will eventually come, and Winston is also very good at eating. What are the characteristics of Reinhardt? Ronan glanced through the movie quickly, and the deepest impression left in his mind was Reinhardt's big and muscular body, which made people feel a little uncontrollable. It can't be strength. Luo Ning opened his mouth wide open, trembling from the bottom of his heart. Roll up your sleeves and try to flex your biceps. Well, the biceps don't give him a little face, the slightly raised muscles look like nothing, and they are soft after being pinched. This is not a muscle, but a little firmer fat is almost the same. If you really need to meet the strength standard, this year is definitely out of the question. If you want to train the muscles of Reinhardt, even if you go to the gym every day, it will take half a year. Furthermore, is it possible for an otaku to exercise every day? Realistic? The answer is of course no. Luo Ning subconsciously ruled out this possibility, and ruthlessly lied to himself. A task that is impossible to complete, such as reaching the strength standard, definitely doesn't need it. So besides the indicator of strength, what else is there? Reinhardt mainly talks about the transformation of Reinhardt, from a crusader who values his personal sense of heroic honor to a leader who understands the sense of collective honor. Reinhardt fought alone at first, then integrated into the army, and then into the Overwatch family. Individual, team, these two inseparable words, individuals form a team, and a team cannot do without individuals. Team, Luo Ning has grasped the center of gravity, and may activate Reinhardt's transformation form, which requires the team index to reach the standard, so what should the team index do? Pull a group of people to find another group of people to fight. Will it be mentally handicapped? So is there any other way? Luo Ning thought about it, but couldn't find any good solution. The team index is a headache. It's also an impossible task. Luo Ning lied to himself again, then rubbed his forehead. When the fate comes, Reinhardt's transformation form will be activated naturally. Let's do the preparations for the next movie first, time waits for no one. The script is ready, now you only need to invite a director, and then select some actors together with the director. Ronan still decided to ask Hopkins to direct. After all, the latter has directed Soldier 76. So, he called Director Hopkins, but no one answered the phone. Luo Ning frowned. The vacation should be over. Reinhardt has been released for so many days after filming. Director Hopkins is not so excited that he even forgets his own job. About 2 minutes later, Director Hopkins called. Who are you to him? Friend. Luo Ning frowned. There was something wrong with the other party's tone, cold and indifferent, without any emotion at all. At 10 o'clock tomorrow night, at the Albuquerque International Airport in New Mexico, I will replace you with $500 million. See you at the Leaky Cauldron bar near the airport. If you don't have the ability, please tell his relatives and friends who are capable. Remind you, you are only allowed to come alone. If you dare to call the police, we will tear up the ticket immediately. Beep, beep. Luo Ning froze on the spot holding the phone, and it took him a while to react. Holding the grass. Director Hopkins went to New Mexico for vacation, but was kidnapped. Do you want to be so lucky? Why didn't the kidnappers call Hopkins' family? I have to wait for him to call. Are these a group of mentally retarded kidnappers? Luo Ning thought for a while, maybe the kidnappers had just kidnapped Director Hopkins, and he called him. This may still be there. Because he never called Director Hopkins on his cell phone, the kidnappers did not know his identity. This would be much easier. No matter what, Director Hopkins had to be rescued. After all, it was Director Hopkins who extended a helping hand during the most difficult time for Overwatch films, and the next film will also need Director Hopkins to direct it himself. Director Hopkins rescued him. But $500 million US, equivalent to more than 3,000 million yuan. The appetite is not small. I'm afraid you don't have the ability. Luo Ning still felt that it would be worthwhile to grab it hard. Even if he donated the $500 million and threw it into the trash, he would definitely not give it to the kidnappers. So, he booked a plane ticket and flew to New Mexico tomorrow morning, which seems to be the place where Thor's plot unfolded. New Mexico, one of the 4 states in the southwestern United States, has infinitely beautiful natural scenery, with magnificent red rock cliffs and boundless deserts. Ronan appeared at Albuquerque International Airport, weaving through the crowd wearing a black mask. To be on the safe side, Luo Ning turned into Soldier 76 in a deserted corner. As soon as he took a step, he felt that it was impossible. If he went to see the kidnapper in this outfit, he would probably scare the kidnapper to death, let alone take him to see Hope. Kings has directed, and it may be a short time to meet. So he activates his super transform form and turns into a stunt driver. This outfit is even more generous, white and blue driver's suit, with 4 5-pointed stars on the chest, 3 more than the US team, 4 times more handsome. Most importantly, the gas mask and tactical goggles on his face were gone, revealing the face of a mature man, with fluffy brown hair exuding vitality, but the short cloak behind him was a little bit of a middle ground, which affected this handsome face. With the cloak off, the outfit is clean and neat, and it looks like it has nothing to do with Soldier 76. Perfect. Ronan touched his smooth face. Except for the prickly chin, everything else was perfect, but the pulse rifle was a little in the way. Try if you can use your mind to make it disappear. As soon as the idea came up, the pulse rifle disappeared. He was very surprised by this. He didn't expect that the pulse rifle could be hidden at any time, so could it be used again? The pulse rifle appeared without warning, and fell to the ground with a thud. Luo Ning snapped his fingers, it was so cool. When you come to the commercial street near the airport, the bars are generally more eye-catching. The door of the bar is always flashing with colorful lights. Stop and look up, it is the destination of this trip, the Leaky Cauldron. Once inside, the lights of all colors made dizziness, and the loud music shook the ears. There was a man who was out of tune with this noisy scene. He sat quietly in a corner by the window, sipping a glass of red wine, as if he was waiting for something. When he came in, the man in the corner also saw him, and then his eyes fell on the suitcase in his hand. That's right. Luo Ning walked over, sat opposite him, and asked softly, "Where is he?" The man said unhurriedly, "Let me see your sincerity first." Luo Ning opened the suitcase towards him, piles of banknotes flashing under the light made his eyes hurt. Of course, in just a moment, Luo Ning closed the suitcase. There were so many people, don't be caught by other malicious people. Follow me. The man got up and walked out, forgetting to look around vigilantly, and after finding nothing unusual, he got into the car parked by the roadside, and Luo Ning followed. The man driving the car forgot to look back, then started the car and left. Just less than 100 meters away, the kidnapper sitting next to Luo Ning took out a pistol and pointed it at his heart. "Don't move around, I have to make sure you don't bring anyone with you." Being held by a gun, he felt more or less flustered. This is not acting in S.H.I.E.L.D., they are all real guns. Even if he has the physical fitness of Soldier 76, he doesn't dare to be arrogant. But Luo Ning knew that the kidnappers did not dare to shoot here, because in a place like the airport, once they fired a gun, they would be arrested instantly, and they did not dare to take the risk. Sure enough, the kidnapper fumbled for a while, and after finding no threat, he put away his gun. The vehicles gradually moved away from the airport and the hustle and bustle of the urban area. The flashing street signs let Ronan know that they had come to Antica Puente. Go on, pass through the sparsely populated frontier town, and come to the boundless desert. Desolate. This place, Luo Ning was inexplicably familiar, and felt like he had seen it somewhere before. The street sign just now seemed to say Antica Puente. Antica Puente is where Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor, fell, and where Thor, the god of thunder, descended. So now, is Thor's hammer down yet? At this time the car stopped, and the kidnappers pulled Luo Ning out of the car. The accomplices of the kidnappers have been waiting here for a long time. There are a dozen of them. There is a van parked next to it, and there are 2 or 3 people in the car. People's shouts were faintly heard in the distance, and the 2 kidnappers who brought him looked over there suspiciously and asked, "What's going on there?" Luo Ning followed the prestige, and there, the lights of the cars were shining, and the sound of shouting could be heard from time to time, and there seemed to be many people gathered. He was very puzzled. It was the middle of the night, and here was the desert again. What did a group of people do there without sleeping? Soon, he realized that there was only one possibility. That's where Thor's hammer is. A group of people curiously wanted to take Thor's hammer for themselves, but the reality slapped each of them in the face and told them, no one can get Thor's hammer. Movable. There are only two kinds of people who can pick up Mjolnir. One is those whose power exceeds Mjolnir, and the other is high-minded, and of course the concept of high quality is very vague. Fortunately, there is a clear example in the Marvel world, Captain America, who symbolizes the American spirit, strong, brave, and righteous. Any positive vocabulary can be used on this strong-willed man. He has an almost abnormal attitude towards freedom and justice. Belief. Even he can only slightly pull Mjolnir, and ask the world, how many people can have the character of the US team? Luo Ning's thoughts were flying. Maybe he could. Late last night, a hammer fell from the sky, and a big hole was made in the ground by it. People in the small town heard the news and wanted to take the hammer home, but as the day passed, no one could afford the hammer. The hammer seemed to be sucked by the ground. No matter how many people pulled it together or pulled it with a cart, the hammer never moved at all, which is so strange. Said one kidnapper. That hammer must sell for a lot of money, said the other kidnappers. But no one can handle it. We all tried. Don't think about those illusory things, let's get the 500 million now. As soon as the words fell, the gazes of a dozen or so kidnappers fell on Luo Ning. Where are people? Ronan asked. One of the kidnappers waved, and someone in the car escorted a person out. Hopkins was blindfolded with a black cloth and his mouth was gagged. Hopkins. Luo Ning walked up, but found that the guy in front of him was not Hopkins. Hopkins had a mole on the corner of his left lip, but this guy didn't. Bringing someone who pretends to be Hopkins is too dishonest, isn't it? Luo Ning said indifferently. The kidnappers were all surprised. They didn't expect that they would find out that Hopkins was a fake with just one glance. At this time, the kidnappers all took out their guns and aimed at Luo Ning. One of the bald kidnappers walked up to Luo Ning casually, and said with a smile, "It's interesting, but do you think you have the strength to bargain with us now? Get on your knees and beg for mercy, boy. Do you really think I'm stupid enough to bring a box of money? I'm not a 3-year-old. Even with a dozen guns pointed at him, Ronan was fearless, because he knew what these guys needed. The suitcase was opened, and the banknotes fell down with a clatter. Except for the banknotes on the top layer, the bottom layer was all white paper. You kid dare to play us. The bald kidnapper was furious. He took a step forward and grabbed Luo Ning by the collar. His face was ferocious. It's not smart to be so close to Soldier 76. With his arms wrapped around his backhand, the huge force left the bald kidnapper with no room to resist. In the blink of an eye, Luo Ning strangled his neck, and the pulse rifle in his right hand emerged, aiming at his head. The other kidnappers were panicked and didn't know what to do for a moment. It would be fine if someone else was kidnapped, at worst he would be given his life, but it would be troublesome if the kidnapper was their boss. I'll ask again, where are people? Luo Ning's aggressive aura temporarily overwhelmed the vicious aura created by the kidnappers. It's easy to talk about money when you see someone. If you don't see someone, it's not as simple as just dying. Luo Ning spoke calmly, as if he was not fighting for his life, but doing a very ordinary thing, like washing and cooking. In fact, he wanted to let the kidnappers know that there was only one end for going against Soldier 76. Who do you think you are? Being held hostage, the bald boss dared to utter wild words, which made Luo Ning very upset. The butt of the gun was smashed hard, and a big bump protruded from his shiny bald head. Perhaps you can look at the gun in my hand. Luo Ning is so tired, a bunch of elm heads, it's just. Can you still pretend to be pleasant? Seeing the blue, white, and black rifles, the kidnappers took a small step back in unison, and looked sideways with their bald heads. Their hearts were beating wildly with fright, and they said tremblingly, you are a soldier. 76. The boss's affirmative tone made his younger brothers tremble with fear. If the guy in front of him was Soldier 76, the consequences would be disastrous. Soldier 76 fought back the mercenary group in Bright Star, and then blew up the mercenary base by himself. This kind of terrifying guy is not something they can deal with. Quick, bring that old guy out. The bald boss panicked completely. Soldier 76 beat them like punching a kindergarten or kicking a nursing home, without any pressure. At this time, he didn't want money anymore, he just wanted to save his life. Yes, a kidnapper got into the car and took Hopkins out, also blindfolded and covering his mouth. Luo Ning took a closer look, but he still didn't find the mole on the corner of his mouth. He was so angry that he tightly strangled the bald boss's neck. I don't have the patience to play with you. The bald boss blushed from being strangled, his eyes were wide open. The kidnappers were at a loss and shouted, Master 76, he is Hopkins, if you don't believe me, look. A kidnapper took away the black cloth, and the moment he saw the eyes, he was shocked. What? Why is Marcus you? The other kidnappers were also full of doubts. Marcus, didn't you go pee? After removing the cloth ball from his mouth, the man yelled, I'm pissing on your face. He was rescued by a man and woman, and he drove in that direction. The man pointed to the distance where the headlights were shining. Luo Ning frowned. Was rescued. Who saved it? A man and a woman went to the place where Thor's hammer fell. Could it be? There is a possible match, Thor and Jane. However, this does not match the original plot. The original plot was that Jane brought Thor here after S.H.I.E.L.D. protected this place. In any case, we can only chase the past now. The kidnappers around him stared at him vigilantly, with the black muzzle pointing at his forehead. Luo Ning was suffering, the energy of the tactical eyepiece was not fully accumulated, and he couldn't kill these guys in a second. If he forced a war, he might be shot. Weighing the pros and cons, Luo Ning decided to let them live, in fact, to avoid a head-on conflict. Don't move. If you dare to move, your boss will die. Luo Ning took the bald boss into the car and drove with one hand. After driving for a certain distance, he opened the car door and threw the bald boss out. Boss, boss. The boys ran over, and the bald boss got up, blushing and pointing at the van. Leave me alone, blow the tire. Boom, boom. It was said that the kidnappers stood still and shot the van with guns. Hearing gunshots coming from behind, Luo Ning flexibly stepped on the oil and gas. The steering wheel was endowed with a soul, turned left and right, and the body also performed acrobatics with his operation. The car's butt shake back and forth. What kind of ghost car skill is this? The kidnappers were so angry. The car was more nimble than a snake. Not a single bullet was hit, let alone the tires. Luo Ning was surprised to find that his driving skills were getting higher and higher, even better than Thomas. After thinking about it, it may be because of the stunt driver skin, and the experience of Winston Wukong, let him know that the super transformation form can not only change the skin, but also bring buffs. A stunt driver, as the name suggests, is a driver who can perform stunts. The van was endowed with a soul, like a boa constrictor, moving around nimbly. No matter how many bullets he had, no matter how skilled his marksmanship was, he still couldn't hit it. When we arrived at the Tianqing, under the illumination of many flashlights, a hammer that looked like stainless steel was planted obliquely in the soil, with the handle of the hammer facing upwards, which was very clear. Even in the middle of the night, there are still many people around here. An uncle tied the hammer with a rope and tried to pull the hammer in his car, but he couldn't drive it even with the maximum horsepower. Then, with a boom, the hemp rope as thick as his thumb broke. Everyone shook their heads, feeling that no one could afford the hammer. At this moment, a man with neat blonde hair jumped into the deep pit. He looked up at the people around him and laughed loudly. Of course you mortals can't take Mjolnir, only I, Thor, the son of Odin, is qualified to pick up Mjolnir. There is no doubt that this guy is regarded as mentally handicapped by everyone. Countless eyes of caring for the mentally handicapped are thrown at him, and laughter continues. You, Thor, son of Odin, I'm still the father of Odin. Someone laughed. As soon as the words were finished, the clear sky was suddenly covered with dark clouds, thunder was rolling, and several lightning bolts struck across the sky, as if to tear the sky apart. Thunder and lightning. The terrifying celestial appearance made everyone tremble in fright. The guy who insulted Odin even had his legs weak, sat down on the ground, trembling all over, bowed to the sky, and said with a trembling mouth, Father of the gods, I didn't mean to offend, I was just joking, sorry, forgive me. Odin seemed to be able to hear his words. The thunder and lightning stopped suddenly, but the big raindrops fell. Thor looked at the sky with doubts, feeling unwilling. He felt that he had done nothing wrong. Why did his father drive him into the mortal world? Immediately, he stared at the hammer again. With the power given by the hammer, Heimdall could hear the call, and he could return to Asgard. So, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the handle of Mjolnir's hammer. Unexpected torrential rain fell, and the enthusiasm of these people remained undiminished. They held up umbrellas with umbrellas, and drenched in the rain without umbrellas. Thor's relaxed face suddenly became dignified, because he realized that he couldn't hold Mjolnir. 2 hands, still not enough. Mjolnir did not move at all. What? Thor exhausted his breastfeeding strength, his muscles bulged, and tendons wrapped around his arms like horned dragons. However, Mjolnir showed no sign of trembling even slightly. Jane, who was watching from above, shook her head. Sure enough, what Thor said were all fairy tales, and none of them were true. He was not the son of Odin, and there was no rainbow bridge leading to the god realm. Fake, all fake. Finally, Thor gave up. He let go of the hammer, faced the sky, and growled unwillingly, saying in his heart, "Father, why did you do this to me?" Raindrops slid down Thor's cheeks, drenching him to the bone. Thor fell to his knees weakly. Without the hammer, he could not recover his divine power, and there was no possibility of returning to Asgard. Let me just say, how could this guy be the son of Odin? It's so nonsense. This coercion is pretty good, but it doesn't have the ability to match it. The onlookers laughed. The hammer couldn't even pull the car. It didn't even move. Even if it pulled 10 cows, it would be impossible to pick up the hammer with your own strength. It's tantamount to fantasy. All of this was within Ronan's expectations. Thor is not qualified to pick up Mjolnir now, and Mjolnir will be summoned only when his heart is awakened. What about people? After looking around, Luo Ning didn't see Hopkins, but saw Jane Foster, a girl with a pair of beautiful eyes. Now, it seems that I can only ask her. Hi, Ronan said hello, but Jane ignored him, but stared at Thor with all her attention. She didn't know what Thor had gone through, and she didn't know what happened to Thor. Thor showed such a desperate expression that it made her very worried. Hi ma'am. This time, when Jane heard his voice, she subconsciously waved her arms. She thought it was the group of people chasing after him. Ronan grabbed her wrist instinctively, curled the corners of his mouth, and tried to be amiable. Hey. Ma'am, take it easy, I'm not a bad person, I just want to ask you something. You hurt me. Jane blinked angrily. Oh, sorry. Luo Ning quickly let go of his hand. After transforming, his physical strength was too strong, and he was not sure of his strength. What do you want to ask? Jane rubbed her wrists and looked around vigilantly. The white van in her vision made her pupils shrink suddenly, and then ran away without looking back, jumped into the pit and grabbed Thor's hand, shouting, "Hurry up! Run, here they come!" Luo Ning followed Jane's gaze, and patted his forehead helplessly. He was so stupid, and Jane regarded him as an accomplice of the kidnappers. Thor was unmoved. He was thinking about the problem. What did he do wrong? Even Mjolnir no longer agreed with him. Could it be? Did he really do something wrong? Shouldn't he be going to Jotunheim to slay those frost giants? Come on, Thor, what is there to miss about this hammer? While looking at Ronan's position, Jane pulled Thor, but her strength was too weak to pull Thor at all. Luo Ning frowned. If those guys chased him, things would become much more troublesome. It was not because he was worried that he would not be able to beat him, but because he was afraid that the kidnappers would kill him in a hurry. It seems that you have to take the initiative. Looking back, there are more than a dozen figures running towards him in the distance. So he also jumped into the pit. The heavy rain made the pit very muddy, his feet were covered with mud, and his trouser legs were also stained by mud. Ronan didn't care about this, and walked towards the hammer, and Jane backed away in fright, calling, "Thor." Thor didn't respond, and still knelt there in contemplation. Luo Ning gave her a blank look. I'm really not a bad person, I just robbed their car. Obviously, Jane didn't believe it. How about snatching the kidnapper's car alone and coaxing melon seeds? Hey buddy, it's useless to kneel here and think about it. Stand up if you're a man. Ronan walked up to Thor and patted him on the shoulder lightly, but there was still no response. Thor's current state was as if his soul had been taken away, and his body was empty. Jane blinked suspiciously, and brushed the hair sticking to her face back. This man didn't look like a bad guy. The onlookers laughed strangely, watching the performance of the three monkeys in the pit. Hey, you should pick up the hammer. It's raining so hard. If you can't take it away, go home and sleep. Don't catch a cold. Someone laughed. Come on, don't be ashamed, a hammer that can't be pulled away by a car, even if you. In the middle of speaking, his eyes widened, as if he saw something unbelievable. Oh, God, he actually picked it up. Is he a god? The onlookers opened their mouths into an, oh, shape and took out their mobile phones to take pictures. This scene was too shocking. Luo Ning also just had the idea of trying, but he didn't expect to succeed. With only one hand, he easily picked up Mjolnir. Rumble. When he completely held Mjolnir in his hand, a thick thunderbolt suddenly descended from the sky, like a thunder dragon swooping down, enveloping Luo Ning's body. In the dark night, it was suddenly illuminated by lightning as bright as day. In the sky above the head, there were bursts of muffled thunder, forming a huge thunder vortex, as if it wanted to absorb all things into it. Endless lightning struck down forcefully, and all of them converged on the person holding Mjolnir tightly. Such a vision surprised and delighted the crowd. Although they were terrified, they could not stop their curiosity about the unknown. My God, Jane's eyes widened, and then she blinked twice, thinking that she was hallucinating. Thor looked at the change in front of him in astonishment, and he knew exactly what it meant. No matter who holds the hammer, anyone who has the qualifications will get the power of Thor. Luo Ning's pupils flickered with lightning, and violent thunder and lightning lingered around him. In an instant, the thunder and lightning stopped suddenly, and the heavy rain also stopped. The dazzling lightning disappeared, and Luo Ning, who was holding Mjolnir tightly, appeared in the eyes of everyone again, of course as a stunt driver, 76. Wow, what did I see? Fortunately, I recorded a video. This is definitely the most spectacular cosmic phenomenon in a century. The god of thunder in mythology. My God, the rain is not in vain. The crowd was amazed, but Luo Ning was stupefied. Even Captain America couldn't lift Mjolnir, but he did. Even if he transforms into Soldier 76 now, he shouldn't be able to move it so easily. Soldier 76 has a heart of justice and a noble character, at best similar to the US team. Suddenly, he thought of the only flaw of the US team, which is that it can be an enemy of the whole world for the sake of the former brother, the Winter Soldier. But Soldier 76 is different. As long as it is evil and dark, he will do everything in his power to eradicate it, and in order to uphold justice, he can withstand the pressure of the whole world, and under the circumstance of being misunderstood by countless people, he can launch a campaign alone. In the battle to find out the truth about Overwatch's disbandment. Behind the disbandment of Overwatch, there must be a huge conspiracy threatening the world. No matter what, at this moment, Mjolnir was held in his hand. Then he is Thor. Just, what happened? The kidnapper who was chasing Luo Ning froze in place, looking at each other. The vision that appeared in the sky just now was too terrifying. It was so terrifying that his scalp felt numb at that moment. Until now, he still couldn't get rid of that scene in his mind. That sinkhole seems to have caused a change in the world. I don't know, are you still chasing after? The kidnappers were all scared, afraid that if they went any further, they would step into the abyss. At this time, the bald boss chased after them, and when he saw them stop in place, he yelled angrily, "What are you doing here? Why don't you go after them?" But boss, but your uncle, don't you want 500 million? The bald boss said angrily. Yes, boss. Holding Thor's hammer tightly in his hand, Luo Ning's whole body was full of strength, and the feeling of beating all living beings was born spontaneously. Use the earth as a chopping board, and everything is a fish. Who are you? Why did you pick up Mjolnir? Thor said in a deep voice, his eyes filled with murderous intent. He knew that there were only two kinds of people who could hold Mjolnir. One was a person with a high moral character and a righteous heart, and the other was a person whose strength was greater than Mjolnir. He can't judge the identity of this person now. The worst result is that Mjolnir will be taken away by someone whose power exceeds it. Once this person's purpose is not pure, it will bring crisis to this world. Whoever holds this hammer is Thor. Luo Ning stared at him, shook the hammer in his hand. You want it? Come and get it. As soon as he took a step, he heard someone shouting on the pit, "Don't move." Immediately afterwards, someone screamed. Luo Ning looked back, and the kidnappers were chasing him. He frowned. Originally, he wanted to use the hammer to lure Thor away, so that Jane would follow him, and then go to a safe place to ask Hopkins' whereabouts. Now it seems that this plan is one step too late. This group of kidnappers is really persistent. For the $500 million, they even gave up their lives. More than a dozen kidnappers stood apart, looking down at them in the pit from a high position, and pointed their pistols at them. "Don't move. Anyone who dares to move will kill him." The bald boss looked around ferociously, afraid that someone would call the police. After all, they are not a big criminal gang and dare not confront the police. The crowd trembled in fright, and gave up on calling the police. Their eyes full of hope fell on Luo Ning. This guy who can pick up a hammer to trigger lightning will definitely be able to deal with these gangsters. Maybe he is the son of Odin in the myth, the god known as the god of thunder. Facing the ferocious bald boss of the civilians, when his eyes fell on Luo Ning, he couldn't help but shiver. Soldier 76 is not something to mess with. He wasn't going to let his guard down because Soldier 76 didn't have a rifle in his hand. That hammer. The bald boss suddenly constricted his pupils, his face extremely terrified. Did he know that this hammer could not even pull a car, but now it was held by an ordinary person? Even if Soldier 76 is a strengthened human being, his strength shouldn't be so strong. The bald boss acted so panicked, not to mention the other kidnappers, who seemed to be as stable as old dogs on the surface, but they were actually panicking inside. If you observe carefully enough, you will find that their gun-holding hands are trembling slightly, which is the fear from the depths of their souls. Soldier 76, a guy who destroyed the mercenary base by himself, now easily holds the hammer that no one can lift in his hand. Who the hell would have thought of tying up a ticket to tie up Soldier 76? I knew it would be like this, and I shouldn't have kidnapped Hopkins in the first place. Well now, Hopkins is gone, leaving a mess and maybe a life. Put down the hammer. The bald boss pretended to be fierce. If you say let it go, don't I lose face? Luo Ning smiled half-smile. Thor didn't do anything, just stared at Ronan like that, really couldn't figure out why people on Earth could hold Mjolnir, it's unscientific. I warn you. Before the bald boss finished speaking, Luo Ning held up Mjolnir, and read out a naughty word from his mouth. 9 heavens profound break, turned into divine thunder. Brilliant heavenly power, attracted with a hammer. The sound of the last word fell, boom. Unexpected thunder exploded, startling everyone. One of the kidnappers trembled suddenly, and threw away his gun. Thunder vortexes appeared in the sky again, billowing thunder descended and was absorbed by Mjolnir. There were no waves on Thor's face, and it was very common to guide Tianlei. Jane had never seen it before, and immediately covered her mouth and screamed, it was so real. WTF. One of the kidnappers stared wide-eyed, pointed his pistol at the sky and didn't respond. The brother next to him seized the opportunity to snatch the gun away and pointed it at him instead. The bald boss's eyes are dull. Thor is coming, just kidding. Mortals fighting gods. Take your life to win. Although he didn't understand why Soldier 76 suddenly turned into Thor, he knelt down without hesitation and said, Master Thor, please spare us. Throw the gun on the ground, and spare you not to die. Luo Ning's calm words sounded like death's order to them, and they dared not disobey. Seeing that the boss threw away the guns, the younger brothers also threw away the guns, holding their heads in their hands, and the crowd took advantage of the situation to pick up the guns to prevent any further complications. The hammer has absorbed too much thunder force, it has to find a place to pour it out, and it is almost unable to hold it. It was the first time for Luo Ning to use Mjolnir, and he had no experience. He directed all the thunder and lightning from the sky, causing Mjolnir to be filled with explosive power, just like a balloon that is constantly inflated. If you don't let the air go, it will explode instantly. Release the lightning accumulated on the hammer, otherwise it will automatically pour out its power, and this area will be razed to the ground. Thor said anxiously. Obviously, the other party was a young Thor, and even Mjolnir couldn't use it. Luo Ning stared. Is it so scary? It's not afraid to raze this place to the ground. There are no buildings in the desert, so I'm afraid of harming humans. There are people all around. Well, Ronan waved to the sky. Endless thunder stretched out from the hammer, covering the sky like a spider web, and the dark sky suddenly shone with dazzling light, turning the night into day in an instant. The bald boss's face froze, and he swallowed with difficulty, thankful that he recognized the gap in strength, otherwise he might be beaten into a piece of coke by lightning. The other kidnappers were extremely remorseful. Why did they kidnap Hopkins in the first place, and why did they catch up now? Isn't this asking for trouble? The spectacular celestial phenomenon made the people in the small town exclaim, thinking it was a rare cosmic phenomenon. Luo Ning walked out of the Tianqing and asked the crowd to call the police to arrest the kidnappers. After the process was over, the crowd rushed up to take pictures and pushed Thor and Jane aside. How could Thor be so angry? He pushed them away arrogantly. Get out of my way, I am Thor, the god of thunder, how dare you disrespect me? Even with all the stares, he still feels good about himself. Jane followed behind, apologizing to the crowd pushed away by Thor one by one. Ronan and Thor looked at each other, and after a brief silence, Thor spoke surprisingly. What a coincidence, you are also Thor. Facing Thor's retarded words, Luo Ning pretended to be puzzled, and pointed to the sky. I'm Thor, the one in the sky. If you can pick up Mjolnir and be recognized by it, you will have the power of the thunder god, but you are not the god of thunder in the sky. The sky you are referring to is Asgard, and I am the god of thunder in the realm of gods. You are at best the Thor of Earth. Thor said seriously. From the performance just now, it can be seen that this mortal who can pick up Mjolnir is a person who punishes evil and promotes good. Being recognized by Mjolnir shows that he has a noble character and a righteous heart, so there is no need to worry for the time being. But he still couldn't understand why he couldn't hold Mjolnir. Was this his father's test for him? Or is he not qualified to be recognized by Mjolnir now? Puff. The people around laughed and talked nonsense in a serious manner. Don't use ignorance as capital to laugh at others, a group of mortals. Thor stared and looked around. That's it, then you take the hammer. Ronan handed the hammer to Thor. Thor still has a fluke mentality, what if he can shake it now? So he grasped the handle of the hammer with a serious expression on his face. As soon as Luo Ning let go, Thor's arm was dropped by the hammer, and it hit the ground with a boom. There was another burst of laughter, and everyone pointed fingers at Thor, treating him as a psychopath. Jane shook her head. It seems that Thor was talking nonsense before, running the train with her mouth full, but she still had expectations. This man with 4 stars printed on his chest is Thor. She curiously looked at Luo Ning, who had transformed into a stunt driver, and a smile appeared on the corner of her lips. The appearance of a god is no different from that of a mortal, and she thought it would shine. Why? Thor tried desperately to pick up Mjolnir, but the hammer would not budge. Don't force it, I'll take the hammer first. Luo Ning sighed, bent down and picked up Mjolnir easily. I have to say that this feeling is very good, holding the hammer, as if owning the whole world. Thor buried his head, and his mood was extremely broken. This guy easily took Mjolnir in front of him, but he couldn't do anything but doubt his life countless times. Actually, I don't want to be a Thor, and I'm not interested in this hammer. I'm just here to find someone. Ronan's eyes moved back and forth between Thor and Jane. You saved someone, right? Director Hopkins, I was sent by Mr. Ronan to save him. Ronan, is that the Ronan who made the movie? Jane was a little excited. Luo Ning nodded. Yes, so can you tell me where Director Hopkins is? Send him back safely, and I can report to Mr. Luo Ning. We put him in hiding, and he's just. Jane said. Simple. Thor interrupted her and looked at Ronan seriously. He can go, but you can't. Because of the hammer. I can leave it here. It didn't matter to Luo Ning. He wasn't interested in being a god of thunder, so it was the last word to bring Director Hopkins back to film and make money. No, it's not safe for you to leave Mjolnir here, and I can't take it away now. You have to stay here to watch Mjolnir during this time, and wait for me to regain the qualification to own Mjolnir. Thor's tone was strong, with a commanding tone. Maybe I can keep it for you. While they were arguing about this, a man in a suit came over quietly. No, in this matter, Ronan and Thor are surprisingly consistent. Coulson touched his nose, smiled awkwardly, and said, this kind of power should not be controlled by one person. If it is not used properly, it will endanger the world, so it should be protected by us. Luo Ning has a big head. why is S.H.I.E.L.D. here at this time? Annoying. Can you move it? If you can't move it, first reflect on whether you have any improper thoughts. Thor said to Coulson. He never had a good face towards these guys who tried to get their hands on Mjolnir. He looks like a human being, but no one knows what's going on inside. I'll try. Coulson didn't believe in evil. Ronan put the hammer on the ground. Coulson squinted his eyes and smiled, leaned over and held the hammer, and couldn't move the hammer even with all his strength. The legs are separated, the hands are held together, like pulling out a carrot, but the hammer still cannot be shaken. He straightened up and clapped his hands, and smiled to resolve the embarrassment. Well, since everyone's goal is to maintain peace, I hope that Your Excellency can lend a helping hand when the world encounters danger. His eyes were on Ronan, not Thor. In an instant, thousands of grass and mud horses galloped through Thor's heart. He is the orthodox Thor, but now he has no power, depressed. Coulson also understands that not everyone can afford this hammer. Even if S.H.I.E.L.D. protects it well, this hammer will not be effective. It is better to return it to its original owner. There are also many powerful helpers. Anyway, the director's order to him was to make sure that the hammer wouldn't be taken by someone with an impure motive. Ronan smiled slightly. Obviously, Coulson regarded him as Thor. After all, it was he who picked up the hammer, not Thor. If the hammer is still in my hand by then I am willing to help. Hearing this answer, Coulson nodded in satisfaction, and left with his men. Believe me, I am the owner of this hammer. In a few days, I will be able to pick it up. Thor looked firmly. After thinking for a long time, Luo Ning agreed to him. Maybe he could use this to activate Reinhardt's transformation form. There was no opportunity to fight before, but there is now. Jane wondered. She seriously thought that Thor had hallucinations, but Thor believed in him. She thought that there was no one more stupid than her. It seems that she is still too young, and not all gods are smart. Thor and Jane lead him to Hopkins' hiding place, under a sloping stone eaves a few hundred meters away. After sending Hopkins to the airport together and seeing him board the plane with his own eyes, Luo Ning was relieved and went with Thor and Jane with peace of mind. Where are we going now? Thor asked. Jane glanced at the distant sky, and the fish belly was like a touch of watercolor, gently passing by. Go to where I work, it's almost dawn. In fact, her residence is very small, and there are no extra beds for them to sleep in. Along the way, Jane always looked at him like an alien, asking this and that, which made Ronan very uncomfortable, and Thor was also very uncomfortable. When they came to the temporary workplace in the small town, due to being too tired, several people leaned on the chairs with their eyes closed and fell asleep within a few minutes. Asgard. Thor's 4 little friends came to Earth through the Rainbow Bridge when the guardian Heimdall turned a blind eye. Loki was very angry about this, so he, as the new king, awakened the steel giant guarding Asgard and gave orders. Make sure my brother can't come back and destroy everything. The video of Luo Ning guiding thunder went viral on YouTube, and the speed of the network spread was astonishingly fast. In less than a day, all the places covered by the network knew that Thor had descended on the Earth. Everyone was shocked by this. No one thought it was a special effect. The video shook slightly, accompanied by exclamations from the onlookers. It was obviously recorded with a mobile phone. Furthermore, the special effects can't be that good. The lightning, the thunder, and the thunder vortex clearly happened in reality. Even the world's top producers can't produce such realistic scenes and special effects. The government selectively ignores it. The video is not from a reporter. It looks very real, but in fact there is no authenticity at all. Moreover, if this kind of news is released, it may cause panic among the people. The YouTube video has caused a large number of reporters to rush to Antigua Puente, New Mexico, to compete for first-hand news about Raytheon. Before that, of course S.H.I.E.L.D. got the news, so Coulson rushed to the scene so quickly, but Coulson was fooled by Ronan. Coulson went to the police to investigate and found out that he had been tricked. That kid was not Thor, let alone the owner of the hammer, but Soldier 76. After Nick Fury learned of the news, he immediately gave Coulson an order: be sure to take the hammer back and use all means. After watching the Thor video on YouTube, Nick Fury knew the horror of this hammer, and it must not be taken by anyone other than the original owner. In the face of powerful power, no matter how strong the mind is, people will be affected by it, not to mention that Soldier 76 is just an ordinary person with strong physical fitness, and he also has 7 emotions and 6 desires. After Coulson received the order, he immediately mobilized a special agent team to monitor everything that happened in the town at all times. Boom! Accompanied by a burst of powerful energy fluctuations, Tony's little friends, the 3 warriors of Asgard and the female warrior, 4 of them appeared in the desert on the edge of the town. Where's Thor? That small town, go in and have a look. In the boundless desert, there was no one to be seen, but the small town not far away caught their attention. The 4 warriors of Asgard walked into the town swaggeringly. Vostag, who holds a double-edged axe and can eat and drink, walked in the front, and Hogan and Fandral sandwiched the female warrior Sif in the middle, and followed closely behind. They looked at the surrounding residents curiously, and those residents looked at them even more curiously, thinking they were actors from a certain crew. The openness of the Asgard warriors fell into the eyes of the 2 SHIELD agents who were monitoring here, one gnawed on the finger cakes, and the other sucked milk. In this regard, the milk-drinking agent joked, "Is there a Renaissance carnival recently?" "Report to the higher-ups," said the agent who ate the pancake. "All right." The agent took a deep sip of milk, picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "Headquarters, we saw Xena, Jackie Chan and Robin Hood." In the spacious house, Ronan leaned on the chair and slept peacefully until he smelled the aroma of steak and eggs. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and saw the blurry Thor and Jane preparing breakfast, and lazily said, "Honey, you guys got up really early." "Is it early? The sun is drying my ass." Jane pointed to the door. Luo Ning glanced at it, his eyes were squinted by the sunlight, then he stood up and stretched, yawning and saying, "Ah, it's almost noon, I really slept like hell." Then seeing 2 strangers he knew, Jane ran over and introduced them with a smile. She first pointed to a middle-aged man with thinning hair. "Eric Shavig, a doctor of astronomy, can be said to be an expert in astronomy. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Thor." Eric stretched out his hand eagerly. Just now Jane told her what happened last night. If he hadn't seen the grand occasion last night, he would never believe it. Now he believes it. "Hi Dr. Savage, you can call me Jack." Luo Ning shook hands with a smile. Jack is Soldier 76's real name, so let's borrow it first. Then Jane pointed to a young girl, put it on her shoulders, and said with a bright smile, "Daisy Louise, my good friend, is a top student." Daisy got up from her seat in a panic, smiled at the corner of her mouth, looked at Luo Ning, and said timidly, "Don't listen to Jane's nonsense, she is the top student." "Hello, Miss Louise." Ronan offered to extend his hand. "Ah, it's my first time dealing with God, I'm sorry." Daisy was stunned for 2 seconds, then stretched out her hand in a panic, and stood there stupidly after holding it. Jane felt sorry for her, pushed her back to the chair, and continued to make food. Recalling the behavior just now, Daisy was about to cry stupidly by herself, and she finally met the male god, but her performance was so embarrassing, too low. Where did she go who was always talkative? Luo Ning sat down and smiled faintly. "This girl is so cute and silly." "Thank you." Thor brought 2 plates of steak and fried eggs, and Eric and Daisy thanked them politely. "You're welcome." Thor turned and brought 2 more dishes. One disc was gently placed on Jane's position, and the other disc was casually placed in front of Ronan. Luo Ning frowned slightly. Did he have a problem with his Earth Thor? Thor turned around and glanced at Ronan resentfully, hesitated to speak, was about to be mad by Ronan, and Thor took it as an addiction. "Guang guang guang, I can find you." The glass door knocked, and Ronan looked over. "Okay. Thor's little friend is here, is he welcome?" "Still welcome, still welcome." He was very calm, but the rest of them couldn't close their mouths in shock. Thor was just surprised how his friend came to Earth to find him. "Cosprey." Eric was stunned, the cup slipped from his hand, and his voice was crisp. "These costumes must be expensive." Daisy nodded. Jane, who was frying eggs, turned her head and looked at it for a long time, and then turned off the fire quickly after smelling the burning smell, thinking that this could not be Thor's friend in God's domain. "My friend." Vostag hugged Thor tightly. "Great. Great. Liar," Eric said to himself, and glanced at Luo Ning, who was eating calmly. "There was a mistake, isn't Thor this?" "Let me introduce Miss Sif and the trio of Asgard warriors." Vostag introduced the double-edged axe with emotion. Eric, Jane, and Daisy all looked at Ronan suspiciously. Luo Ning spread his hands and forked up fried eggs to eat. He had never admitted that he was god of thunder, at best he was earth god of thunder. They are my friends. Thor looked at Eric and the others with a smile, and then looked at the Asgard warrior. Did my father ask you to take me home? They shook their heads and told Thor in detail what happened in God's domain. Thor was furious after hearing this. All this is Loki's plan. In order to seize the throne, he should be exiled forever. It is too hateful. No wonder Heimdall couldn't hear his call. It turned out that Loki ordered Heimdall as the new king not to let Heimdall open the Rainbow Bridge for him. During the conversation, Vostag suddenly saw the hammer leaning against the wall, and looked at Thor in surprise. Mjolnir, have you found it? Sorry, Thor can't hold Mjolnir now, it's for me now. After eating enough, Luo Ning got up and burped, walked over to pick up Mjolnir easily, and smiled at them. The warrior of Asgard saw Luo Ning pick up Mjolnir, and was stunned for a moment. Mjolnir couldn't even lift them. How could a mere mortal be able to lift them? Who is this kid? Who are you, and why are you holding Thor's hammer? Volstagg lit up his double-bladed axe. The other three warriors also stared at Luo Ning unkindly. I think you can ask Thor this question, Luo Ning said calmly. They all looked at Thor, and Thor pondered for a moment before he said, I can't move Mjolnir now, so let this Earth resident take care of it for me. He can move Mjolnir, which shows his heart. No dark thoughts, you can get to know him. His name is Jack, there is nothing wrong with it, just. What is it? Sif asked. Thor hesitated to speak, pulled the corners of his mouth slightly, as if smiling. It's nothing, he is very nice. Hearing this, Vostagg put down the double-edged axe, smiled and said to Ronan, my friend. I'm so sorry, I'm impatient, and I just saw you holding a hammer. It's okay. Luo Ning knew them one by one. I didn't expect someone on Earth to be able to move Mjolnir. Hogun was a little surprised. He was one of the three warriors of Asgard. He was holding a mace and had an oriental face. It was because he was from God's realm that he understood what Mjolnir represented. The female warrior Sif looked at Luo Ning up and down, and said puzzledly, I also find it strange that even us with supernatural powers can't handle Mjolnir, but ordinary people on Earth can do it. Thor explained, Mjolnir is not what you think. My father said that no matter who holds this hammer, anyone who is qualified will get the power of Thor. That is to say, anyone can to become the god of thunder, one only needs to be approved by Mjolnir. But, the prerequisite for holding this hammer is to have a noble character and a righteous heart. Thor looked at Ronan and said reluctantly, obviously, this earthling has been approved by Mjolnir, so I call him Earth Thor. At this time, Eric and the others realized that it turned out that Thor was the real Thor, and Jack only got the approval of Thor's hammer, so he possessed the power of Thor. There is another way to hold this hammer, but this method cannot be recognized by Mjolnir, that is, the power is higher than Mjolnir. Such a person may be able to use Mjolnir, but never with the power of Thor. Thor was most worried about the hammer being taken away by this kind of person. Fortunately, the person who took it was Jack. The warriors of Asgard Palace nodded repeatedly, and looked at Luo Ning with admiration. There was no such person in thousands of miles. Standing in front of him, they couldn't even bring up a sense of superiority that belonged to the people of God's domain. In short, the blood of the people of God's domain flowed in them, and they were not even comparable to the people on Earth. They could move Mjolnir, but they couldn't. Jane looked at Ronan, then at Thor, feeling unreal. Is she dreaming? Actually met two Thors. Dr. Eric is completely dumbfounded. This is totally against his academic research, science. In the desert, Coulson led people to the place where the warriors of Asgard descended, and there were imprints left by them on the ground, which seemed to be patterns made of ancient languages. Coulson squatted on the ground and looked at it for a long time, but he didn't know what it represented, so he ordered, go find someone from the language team. All of a sudden, the top of the head was covered by dark clouds, and the vision instantly dimmed. All the sunlight was blocked by the dark clouds. Coulson looked up at the sky, then glanced at the sky in the distance, and then frowned. Why was only his place covered by dark clouds? The dark clouds slowly rotated, and the speed became faster and faster, directly forming a black cloud storm, which rolled up the dust on the ground, and the ground trembled slightly due to the raging storm. The SHIELD agents looked at the sky worriedly, and then there was a boom, a huge air wave was discharged like water, and the dust was flying, shaking them unsteadily. The sky was full of yellow sand, and the agents closed their eyes tightly. After the strong wind blew, the thick dust gradually thinned out, and then they saw clearly that it was a tall steel giant. "Did that Stark guy make something?" one of the agents asked. He had a shiny head and a pair of white-rimmed glasses. If Ronan was there, he would definitely recognize this person. Agent Sitwell, to be precise, was Hydra's undercover agent who infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. "I don't know, that guy won't tell me anything," Coulson said. Coulson walked out with a loudspeaker, stood in front of the steel giant and said, "Hello, your weapons and equipment have not been registered, please report your name." The steel giant walked towards Coulson with heavy steps, and suddenly stopped, peeling off the face armor, revealing the hollow inner shell. Inside the black lacquered armor, raging flames burst out suddenly, and this kind of flames burst out from the gaps in his body, and a powerful force was gathering. Coulson's expression changed, he turned around and ran. "Run, it's coming." All S.H.I.E.L.D. agents scattered in all directions, startled like birds and beasts. A beam of thick flame energy was emitted from the face of the steel giant. The moment it came into contact, the vehicle was blown up, and the agent next to the vehicle was killed before it could run away. With no means of resistance, agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. panicked and ran as fast as they could. The huge movement alarmed Luo Ning and the others. They stood at the door, watching the black cloud vortex disappearing on the desert. Daisy said blankly, "Is there anyone else coming?" The streets of the town were in chaos, and the residents wandered aimlessly along the streets, looking curiously at the desert. "Jane, get out of here quickly," Thor said solemnly. "What about you?" "I'm staying here. Thor is going to battle with us," Vostag said. Thor shook his head. "Everyone, I'm just a mortal now, I'm an oil bottle, and I may kill you, but I can assist you and escort people to safety." Jane came over and said, "If you stay here, I won't leave either." "Don't worry, leave this iron lump to us." Luo Ning waved the hammer in his hand. Thor had to take Jane to evacuate the crowd. Eric and Daisy also assisted them. After the division of labor was completed, the steel giant had already set foot in the town, firing flame energy beams, destroying everything along the way. The residents fled, and Ronan resolutely walked towards the iron giant holding Mjolnir, followed by the 4 Asgard warriors. "It's too embarrassing for a mortal to stand in front of us," Vorstag grumbled, curling his lips. "Jack now has the power of Thor, and he has the power to surpass us." Sif looked at Ronan's back, her eyes glowing with trust. "Help me distract it." After speaking, she went around to its flanks. "I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.